7.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. Since 5:30 p.m., our Board of Education has been in closed session for purposes of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, and discipline of specific employees of the district, litigation, when an action buzzed out here, affecting or on behalf of the particular district has been filed or pending before court or administrative tribunal, and student discipline. And I would entertain a motion to come out of closed session, please. Second, okay. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? No? Okey doke. And I will like to welcome all of you for coming this evening and to remind everyone of our all-important mission to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. And with that, I will ask Ms. Bell for a roll call, please.
Sure. Board members present: Donna Wanke, Susan Price, Terry Fielden, Jackie Romberg, Kristen Fitzgerald, Susan Crotty, and Mike Yensch.
Okey-doke, and I will turn over the good news to our superintendent.
I do have some good news to share with members of the Board of Education and the community, and it's to actually recognize 2 of our own board members who will be receiving an award at the Illinois Association of School Board DuPage Division Dinner Meeting on October 29th, 2013. Board member Mike Yensch, who has received an award in the Illinois Association of School Board Master Board Member Program for obtaining Level 1 and Level 2, and to Board Member Terry Fielden, for, also at the same dinner, for maintaining master status. So congratulations to those board members. Demonstrates a commitment to ongoing professional development and learning in their role as school board members. So I'd like to congratulate them.
It's next now. The good news. And one other piece of good news I would like to share. A large supporter in our community, Office Max, does an initiative each year where they recognize teachers. And I think there were as I understood it, it was at 10 p.m. last Tuesday morning. 1,000 teachers across the United States, 4 in our district, were recognized. The school I was at was a brand new teacher. It was very exciting. It's you storm in a very organized fashion, balloons and flowers and incredible gifts for these teachers. And I don't know, the kids are so excited. They get gift cards and a number of things for their classrooms, but it's called A Day Made Better. And my colleague Kristen was at 2 schools. If you'd like to share your stories, that would be great.
It was a fantastic day. It was really exciting to see our teachers rewarded for their creativity and their hard work, and I think also their expenditures that they've made on behalf of students. So I was at Maplebrook and Madison. Megan Allen was one of the teachers. I'm trying to think the other, Paula Smith, and they were both really touched. It was an exciting day.
And they are nominated by their peers in the district, which makes it that much more valuable. So, and the next part of our meeting is public comment, and I have a couple of slips. If you did not get a chance or did not know you needed to fill a slip out, they're in the hallway at on the desk. You're welcome to fill one out now, and at the end of public comment, I'll also ask to make sure there isn't someone that we have forgotten. But just to refresh the rules, if you're speaking as an individual, you have 3 minutes, and when you come up, and as I call your name, if you come up and speak in the front here with the microphone, just mention your name and address, and if you're speaking on behalf of the group, you have 5 minutes. The first slip I have is Kathy Carnahan. Am I pronouncing that correctly? If you could please come up. Great, thank you. And there will be 2 lights on the mic. This is always I know this woman. She's my neighbor.
Hi, my name is Kathy Carnahan. I live at 1124 Kinsey Court. I am a school psychologist and also a parent of 2 children, one attending Prairie School and one is going to be attending kindergarten at Prairie. And I'd like to make a comment about all-day kindergarten. I appreciate that full-day implementation of kindergarten carries with it a number of logistical and budgetary challenges, but I believe that positive outcomes are well worth the cost. First, a number of research studies have demonstrated the profound effect a full-day kindergarten can have. For example, a 2011 study conducted by Stifler and colleagues compared half-day and full-day kindergarten and found that students enrolled in full-day kindergarten were 3 times more likely to attain end-of-the-year benchmark status than students enrolled in half-day kindergarten. Further, the odds are 40-1 against students attaining end-of-the-year benchmark status if they were not at benchmark when they started kindergarten. Another recent study conducted in 2012 by Andrews examined implementation of various levels of kindergarten in the state of Pennsylvania and found that participation in full-day kindergarten had a greater effect on literacy achievement than participation in extended day programs. Specifically, participation in full-day kindergarten led to significant scores and significant gains in literacy assessment scores and at the end of first and third grades, and the Pennsylvania statewide school assessment reading scores at the end of third grade. A second reason that also counsels in favor of extending half-day kindergarten to full-day instruction in the remaining schools in District 203 is that the current scenario in the district finds only some schools engaged in full-day kindergarten. Unfortunately, this has the potential to advantage children who attend full-day schools over their cohorts who attend schools with only half-day kindergarten. While there will always likely be performance differentials between schools within a district, it does seem a matter of fundamental fairness that children should generally be treated with the same educational opportunities across the district. Moreover, claims of undue preference can be raised, fairly or not, when only some schools have full-day kindergarten, even if the preferences were originally created with the best of intentions. At bottom, equality of educational opportunity across the district should be pursued whenever possible, and extending full-day kindergarten to all schools seems appropriate means to that goal. Thank you.
And the next speaker, please, is Brian, and it's Grabowski. Am I pronouncing that correctly, yes. Brian? Great. And if you could just look for the two lights, the two blue lights, please, and your name and address. Thank you.
Sure. Brian Grabowski, 1532 Tulane Drive in Naperville, and I also will be talking about all-day kindergarten. I know a final decision has not yet been made, but as a parent of a daughter set to start kindergarten next fall, even the prospect of her being at a disadvantage to students in the District 203 schools from the 7 District 203 schools you already put through to all-day kindergarten, as well as to all neighboring 204 schools in over 85% of the state that's already had all-day kindergarten for years. I and other parents of the community find that possibility very disturbing if you don't now also put through the remaining 7 schools effective for next fall. I know that by putting through all-day kindergarten to the other 7 schools, some physical changes in construction will need to be done at them, but that isn't anything that you would have not known years ago and likely decades ago. With that being the case, I would ask that you please review those costs now, allocate the money, and get this project approved and underway so our children going into kindergarten at these schools can be at the same level of education that other schools in 203 have already started to benefit from. You successfully handled any physical limitations and obstacles with the first 7, and there's no logical reason or argument that can be made for not doing the same with the remaining 7, and there's plenty of time to get this done. I also understand you came to your decision to put through the first 7 schools to all-day kindergarten based on general scholarly research that indicated there are greater potential education gains associated with lower-income family households than higher-income households. But I don't see how you can conclude that based off some general research that certain families need all-day kindergarten more than others, with income being the key deciding factor. Unless I'm missing it on your website, I also haven't seen in clear public view the specific data on the percentage of low-income families you're referencing as being the deciding factor for the 7 school districts you chose to put through first. If that data is available, please make a stronger effort to let the community know where it is located and clearly explain the findings and numbers. I've seen that you've cited at those 7 schools that what you are calling a substantial number of students being from low-income families, but I haven't seen specific documentation on those numbers and how, if they greatly differ at all from the other 7 not yet receiving all-day kindergarten. All children deserve to get the best education possible, and the moment you decided to put through the first 7, unless you knew at that time that you could guarantee doing the same for next fall for the remaining 7, that is not fair to the families with kids going into kindergarten next fall. And again, those children would then be at a clear disadvantage as they just start out on their young lives in the school system. In recent weeks, I've heard comments from teachers and leaders in District 203 saying they fully support putting forward the remaining 7 to all-day kindergarten, and not doing so would be the wrong decision. But until you make that decision official, many parents are left wondering if their kids are going to get the benefit of that next fall, or will again be starting at a disadvantage to other kids in this state and across the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Ann Deckert. Thank you. You should see 2 blue lights, and if you can just mention your name
Sure. Let me know if I'm
and your
too loud.
address, please.
Hi, my name is Ann Deckard, and I live at 8 South 060 Creek Drive in Naperville. I'm also here to talk about all-day kindergarten. I have 2 children, one that will be attending Ranch View next year in kindergarten, and a 3-year-old. And the first thing I wanted to do is, as always, thank you for your service. I do appreciate the time that you put forth on these issues, and I know the community does as well. I just want to keep it simple and give 4 reasons why we should implement all-day kindergarten now as opposed to in the future. The first and probably the most important reason is because with the implementation of the new Common Core curriculum, academic standards are higher than ever. An all-day program will better prepare our kindergarten students for Common Core and give them the solid foundation they need to be competitive in life. The second reason is by only having 7 out of 14 elementary schools with all-day kindergarten, we are unfortunately creating an academic disparity across the district. This is an unfair disadvantage to many District 203 students. The third reason, the majority of school districts in Illinois now have all-day kindergarten. New this year to add all-day kindergarten is Chicago Public School District 299. By not offering it, District 203 is in the minority amongst the other districts in the state. And the fourth and final reason why we need to add all-day kindergarten now is the reason my husband and I moved to Naperville 8 years ago was not just for its thriving downtown, but also for its excellent schools. If we continue to dismiss all-day kindergarten, people will move to other school districts that offer it, which may eventually affect property values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that didn't get a chance or came in a little bit later and would like to speak? Okey-doke. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Student ambassadors, we'll get their report at our business meeting. Superintendent staff report.
We have a number of reports to share with the Board of Education and community this evening. The first one, co-curricular update, will be presented by Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Bob Ross, and it's to provide the Board of Education an update on the study of potential drug testing for students involved in our co-curricular programs. So I'll turn it over to Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Bob Ross.
Good evening.
Do you see 2 blue lights?
Yes,
Mr.
I do.
Ross? Good.
I'm not here to talk about all-day kindergarten. I am here to talk about our study of the possibility of using mandatory random drug testing for those students who are covered by the co-curricular code. The outcomes that we'd like to help the board meet during today's presentation is for you to receive a report on what's been done to date, for us to identify for you the benefits of testing, were the board to choose to do that, to describe the costs and the risks of testing, and to propose next steps. Board members may well recall that the co-curricular committee, which is a group that convenes annually, discussed the idea back in February of 2013, and this Board of Education was informed in April of 2013, that there was an idea, a proposal at a co-curricular code review committee meeting, that the Board of Education consider testing students who are covered by that code. We identified a few other schools and school districts that were employing mandatory random drug testing. We contacted school districts in our Midwest benchmarking consortium. And here I have a correction. I have on the screen that only the Edmonds School District, one of the schools in our consortium, that only they in our consortium enact testing. There's actually a second district, and I apologize for the error. The Francis Howell School District also has mandatory random drug testing. So 2 of the districts in our consortium.
How many in the consortium?
10. Let me double check that. There are 4 schools that do not do the testing. There's 2 that do. 1 does voluntary testing. 2 have not been able to reply to us, and then there's us. Then we came back and updated the Board of Education in June. We've also, the Cabinet over this summer has reviewed the national research on the matter, and we've discussed it. We've sought and received the advice of our legal counsel. We've spoken with a few potential vendors so that we better understand what the process would be. I'd like to identify what we think the benefits of testing would be. We would hope that testing would encourage good decision-making by those covered by the testing. And that was kind of where the suggestion came from, you may recall. We also think test results, be they positive or negative, would provide valuable information to families. That's very important to us. We also think that testing would enhance what is already a very strong anti-drug message from the schools and from the district itself. But there are some costs and some risks of testing as well. Depending on the type of testing used, we'd expect the cost per test to be between $30 and $40. Depending on how the tests are conducted, we think some amount of class time would be forfeited for the actual testing. If disciplinary action came as a result of a positive test, a robust appeals process would have to be in place. And we would anticipate challenges to any discipline that might be taken, and there is potential that that could be costly. Here's the next steps that we would like to take. We still need to gain some expert medical advice about the best type of testing to use. Different vendors have a different idea of what the right type of testing is. I'll bet you can guess which type of testing. Each vendor thinks that he or she has the right kind of testing. So we'd like to gain some neutral expert medical advice on that. We'd like to talk about and consider whether mandatory random testing is more intrusive than is appropriate for a public school district to require. We'd like to consider whether a voluntary testing program, perhaps brokered by the district between families and a vendor, would meet our needs. We'd like to continue to discuss this with the members of our consortium. As you may know, we'll be meeting with them in just a couple of weeks here in Naperville. And we'd like to come back to the Board of Education and provide a recommendation before winter break. I'd be pleased to attempt to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Questions? Go ahead. Got it.
So you said that one of the school districts is doing the voluntary program. Can you explain to us a little bit more about the voluntary program?
Sure. In the voluntary program, what happens is families decide if they want to sign their student up, and this is in Keller Independent School District. Families decide they want to sign their student up. The student remains on the list until the family takes the student off the list. Okay? And then that student is entered into their random draw. There's a way to draw numbers, draw names randomly, and you need to draw that from a pool. Some districts do it, anyone who's covered by the co-curricular code. Some districts do it, anyone covered by the co-curricular code or, for instance, parks on campus. In this district, what they do is anyone whose parents have submitted their name. And then they would draw, they would test, they would provide the results to the parents, and then we'd have the option, a district could set up to have an option to do a number of things at that point. Once again, there could be discipline. It could just be inform the family. It could be inform the family, meet with the family, and help the student, match the student up with counseling, match the student up with other services. So that's how that would work.
I had a couple questions during the day, and thank you so much for your extra information that you passed on. So one of my questions was, what's the impact of these kind of drug testing programs? Does it really decrease drug use? And it sounded like from the research that you provided with me, there is some level of measurable success in terms of lowering drug use. How does that compare when you look at the mandatory random versus the voluntary in terms of the level?
Mrs. Fitzgerald, there is some evidence to consider in that area. I don't know that the evidence supports that conclusion quite yet. It may. The research study that we're discussing from the National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance, and the title of the report is The Effectiveness of Mandatory Random Student Drug Testing, discusses a national study and draws some conclusions from that. We've not been able to secure enough information from any of the districts in Illinois who use it, or even in our consortium who haven't been doing it long enough, I don't think, to have data to draw conclusions. Okay. But to your point, the schools that were discussed in this study, in each case, they were schools that had mandatory random drug testing.
Correct.
There were none included that had voluntary.
Right.
So I don't know how to answer. I don't know if the results would be the same under a mandatory or under a voluntary.
Mr. Ross, I assume that when the representatives from Keller are here in October, that can be part of the conversation, what data they may have in their model to indicate reduction in infractions, co-curricular violations, or anything like that regarding their program.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I add on to your question, Kristen? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
University of Texas, there's 3 states in the South, Florida, Texas, and another, who've spent about $1 million a year on mandatory drug testing. And University of Texas did a study on Texas schools about 3 years ago and determined that it didn't change the behavior, it delayed the behavior. So what their results were was that athletes who were doing drugs didn't do drugs during their season, that they were being tested, that they just delayed when they did their drugs. Now that was that situation in Texas, and those are the results I found from that.
I thought it was interesting, this study, thank you so much for providing it also, that it mentions the percentage nationwide that engage in these kind of programs. It is low, it's 14%, but I thought it was interesting just to note just the, what kinds of participation we're seeing from school districts. The other thing that it mentions here is the use of grants for funding to address funding issues when you do. I don't know if that would be applicable for both mandatory random mandatory random or the voluntary. I don't know if you could get grants for both, perhaps, but it might be something to look at. I know also of other school districts that have had hospitals donate, if they were doing drug testing at a hospital, hospitals have donated those services for free to help out with the cost. So it's just something to keep in mind in terms of looking at. I don't know if it makes a difference with the mandatory or the voluntary, but.
Any other questions? Susan?
What are we talking about testing, Bob?
I'm sorry?
What are we talking about testing?
When?
What would we be testing?
For what substances?
What substances?
That would be up to us if we were to do it. One of the big questions that would have to be decided upon is, would we test for alcohol? Some districts do, some districts don't. Of course, we send a very clear message that we do not want our students drinking alcohol. We fight that in many ways, and we promote an anti-alcohol message in many ways. To consider whether or not to include that in any testing we might do would be a discussion that the board would have to have and a decision they have to make. I can tell you that some districts do test for alcohol and some don't. They all, that I have seen, test for things like marijuana.
At this time, we've been very broad in our look. That'll be part of the recommendation that'll come before winter break when we bring that on what specific, how broad we would like the testing to be, if we are to recommend it, or how narrow it could be. We haven't made that final decision at this time.
Have you, and in your research, run into any of the discussion of medications for students with ADHD or ADD, taking those medications that they show up on those tests and the violations of HIPAA that entails? Has that come up?
That concern has been raised. In fact, any medication that a student may be under, properly prescribed by a physician, those results showing up in a positive test, yes, to answer your question directly, that question and the concerns that come along with it, those questions have been raised. And privacy in general is a concern, and that specifically is a big concern, yes.
And so how you will address that, is that going to be part of your recommendation, how to address those privacy concerns?
I don't know what the recommendation is going to be, even whether or not we ought to have testing or whether or not the board ought to, if we would recommend that you enact it. But I think if we had a recommendation saying that we should move forward, that'd be incumbent upon us to address that as a part of the recommendation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Bob, I guess I had a question. You know, and a lot of times when we've had sea changes in terms of discipline or discipline in particular, we've looked for feedback from the community. And I realize that right at this point in time, you've just been gathering information. I think it's very valuable to see if a process would work, and from an education delivery standpoint, if it would make sense to the administrators. Do you foresee getting the community involved, or a group of students or parents or whatever? I realize this germinated out of a conversation with parents and students at Naperville North in the co-curricular meeting. Would that work into this process?
I think a wider net looking for public opinion on this topic would be good. I can tell you when this matter was first raised at a Board of Education meeting back in April, there was some press coverage, and that led to some community input. A lot in the first day or two after the board meeting, and then it tapered off very, very quickly. My read on that is that people had very strong opinions. The feedback that I saw was pretty even. Some thinking on both sides of the issue. I suppose it'd be up to the Board of Education at some point to decide if we wanted to try to devise a way to get more public input. Certainly people are able to speak at board meetings, as we've seen, but that's certainly something to consider, Mrs. Romper.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that I'm interested in, over the last number of years, 3 or 5 years, we've had any number of discipline situations in the district, in a large district like this, and how many of those students would have fallen within this co-curricular code? I kind of have a guess in my mind that it wouldn't be a whole lot. I'm just, not that I wouldn't want any, I have no true basis because I don't know the students' names. And we always want to protect our students, but I'm not, it would just be interesting to see how many, to see if this particular activity would be as beneficial in our district as we were thinking it was when we first heard about it. So, any other comments?
More.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
So I'm assuming that in that process that you're looking through, you will be looking also at just the amount of time that substances stay in the student system varies from substance to substance. And so if we are looking at discipline with the co-curricular code, it may be that, not that we would support it, but it may be that it occurred outside of their co-curricular time, so we'd have to kind of address that to, you know, like Susan had said, it may be occurring outside of their time that they're in the co-curricular activities. So I think we'd have to address disciplinary issues because different chemical substances will have different half-lives, chemistry-wise, and so I don't know. It's something we need to think about as well.
Certainly.
Michael.
Just a couple things on the. I would guess that the majority of the cases we look at, the students have some involvement in co-curricular activities somewhere. I think the vast majority of kids do something. But even besides that, I mean, he's brought up some other interesting stuff. Just because there's been a couple of questions on the testing and the half-life, the way I understand it, at least for the hair samples, basically we're not talking half-life in the sense that it's in your blood and it dissipates that way. Once it's in your hair, it's stuck there. And they typically look back about 3 months. And as far as the alcohol, the way I understand it for this type of testing, the only thing it would identify is binge drinking. It wouldn't show if you had 2 or 3 beers a week ago. But I mean, that'll come out in the details, but just as some background. But since someone brought up the alcohol, my question would be, how would a hair sample showing binge drinking be any more intrusive or different than having a breathalyzer at a event at one of the high schools? And because I know that's been done proactively before events to determine that. I mean, I guess it could be a rhetorical question at this time, but what would be the difference in that? Because I know we've utilized those types of methods before. And I guess one more time, since we don't talk about it, except for every 3 or 4 months, in my mind, a lot of the concerns would also be alleviated if we make absolutely clear that the discipline is not the goal of this, in my opinion. If it's notifying the family and providing services to them, then you're really taking out some of the concerns that you mentioned. I mean, there's still the cost, and don't get me that. Don't get me wrong, but I just wanted to point out that I know there's a broad spectrum, but if the emphasis is on helping the student and the family, and it's really up to the family, and we just give them the tools through whatever method, then you really take away some of those negatives, in my opinion. But just, I know it'll be a little while before we talk about it again.
Susan?
Bob, one of the things that I think would, does this work? One of the things that I think would be helpful, when you had originally talked about it, you talked about it only for co-curricular kids, and since that, would you consider expanding it to the whole population? I mean, if we're going to help kids, if this is to help kids and it's not as a gotcha, why limit it? Because I didn't see that addressed at all. So that would be really helpful, and kind of maybe the steps of what supports would be put in place, because Mike, I think you hit it right on the head. It's not a gotcha. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking to support these kids and their families, and I think a lot of times it comes as a surprise to them, and how that would work into the, like when Susan talked about HIPAA, just the privacy in our schools and with the teachers and with, kind of all that. I think that bigger picture would be really helpful to me when we talk about it next.
Sure, I'd like to do that. And if I may, just a couple of things on your points. If it were voluntary, certainly you could do it with the entire population. You could be open to any family that would choose it. If it were mandatory, our legal advice, our attorneys have told us, we cannot compel anyone who wants to come to school in School District 203 to subject themselves to testing. We can, if they want to participate in co-curricular activities. We can, if they want to have a senior parking spot. The board has the discretion to do that. Those are options available to you according to the law, but not to say the entire student population, because those students have a right to the education without subjecting themselves to the testing. Okay, I do think, Mrs. Craddy, that will come to you and spell out kind of the steps that will happen. We're not completely unfamiliar with that. We do become aware of students in our schools, and we don't become aware through testing, but we become aware of students who do have these issues, and we are unfortunately practiced at helping those families with compassion, matching those students up with services. We can always get better at that, and we always seek to get better at that. But we've been doing that for some time, and we've had a good amount of success with that.
I mean, our goal is always to prevent,
Yes,
not to
certainly.
not to have negative consequences.
So I just want to echo what Mike said. If the discipline action were necessary, I think when you come back next, I'd like to understand under what circumstances discipline would be taken. A better definition, because at least in my mind anyway, it was to help the student and not so much see that they're thrown off the team or something like that. Because I understand about the challenges and so forth, but the challenges theoretically only come if there's discipline action that as a result of the student. If it's a confidential item, which I would think is what it wants to be, you're talking between the student and the family, shouldn't be too much discipline involved with it, and that would alleviate some of the legal challenges that go with it, because we're not pursuing something with that. So if that makes sense to you. So I'd like to understand when discipline would be issued and what that trigger would be at that point.
Any other questions?
Just a comment.
Oh.
Comment. I just want to thank you for your time in researching both the good sides, the positive impact, the pros, the cons, the questions we need to think through. Obviously, this is one of those issues that is the heart of the community, helping our kids grow up and make good choices. And so I really appreciate all the thought that you put into it and look forward to hearing your additional presentation in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Our next report is going to provide the Board of Education with an overview of our school improvement process that we introduced at all of our schools this year. Clearly, I think the board would agree, the most important thing we do is the education of our kids. And we always strive to find opportunities to get better at what we do. And hopefully this process that we're introducing with all of our schools this year will allow us to do that systemically. And our Deputy Superintendent, Kane Osborne, is going to walk you through an overview of the process we've introduced to all schools this year. And then later on, I believe in December, we will be bringing to you the actual plans that the schools have developed with their team. So I'll turn it over to our Deputy Superintendent, Kane Osborne.
Okay, thanks. I want to thank Tim. There we go. Tim Waringa, here or not?
Two blue lights.
I'm looking. There we go.
There you go.
Sorry. Tim Waringa, particularly for his help with this. I'm going to hit tonight. Okay, just the outcomes for tonight. We're going to just answer these questions that you see in front of you. What is Rising Star? Why are all the schools moving to it? How is it different than the previous school improvement plans you might have seen? Why will it produce better in a school improvement process? And what are the school's next steps? When we answer the question, what is Rising Star, we'll also be presenting its basic tenets and steps and delving into how it unfolds. So I can't emphasize enough that the two basic tenets of Rising Star, that it relies on research at its foundation and it focuses on process. The process itself requires a distinct level of collaboration to be successful. If the process is completed by just one person or two people, then it's nothing but compliance. Ultimately, the belief behind Rising Star is that if dedicated and intelligent people collaborate through a research-based process like this, then the outcomes will be the kind of improvement that is deep and long-lasting. This year, there are 9 schools who would be required to use Rising Star under the state requirements that you see there. Those are Mill, Beebe, Ellsworth, Kennedy, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, and both high schools. But we'll talk about why we decided to have all the schools engaged in this process. Also, Rising Star can be accessed online through the Illinois Interactive Report Card by the schools. In fact, the entire process takes place online through this site. This is just a general outline of the process itself. It's a stripped-down visual, and it could be a common descriptor for many school improvement processes that take place. However, Rising Star has distinct components for each of these steps that require adherence, and it's by remaining disciplined as a team in school and addressing these steps that improvement results. This is a more specific way of looking at the steps in the process. Full menu of planning tools includes indicators of effective practice and the wise ways. And the latter is very concise but comprehensive readings. Some of them are just a page, some of them are 2 or 3 pages or more, encapsulating the research on practices at high-performing schools. These readings, along with the agenda that are provided and process forms, create a robust template for the school improvement teams to implement. And then you can see in the first distinct step there that data provided through Pinnacle Insight in the assessment department empowers the teams to remain focused on the best practices and concrete achievement data when assessing how their school is performing on a particular indicator that's provided. And I'll talk about that in a second. These are the different kinds of indicators that are provided under Rising Star. There are 104 total. Thank goodness the schools do not have to assess all 104, which was the case at one time. But those first 2 categories, the teams do assess all the indicators in those categories, and you'll see the deadlines by which the schools have to, the school teams have to submit their assessments of those indicators. Also, SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And just as an example, here is one of the indicators. I think it's one that a lot of the schools are working with this year particularly. It's an indicator, think of an indicator as a picture of your school in an ideal state. So if you're doing everything in this indicator perfectly, you're a high-performing school in that area. The teams then assess how close they are as a school to obtaining that ideal state in that indicator. And they go through steps to do that. They also then determine how high of a priority is it for the school to work towards reaching that ideal state in that indicator compared to where they are in the other indicators. Once they do that then with the indicators, they then create in step 3 the plan that goes with it. Once they've said, here's how far we are, here are our highest priority indicators, Then they come up with a plan that helps them improve on a specific set of indicators. The state recommends 3 to 5 per year, and we also concur with that, that the teams work on 3 to 5 per year. Step 3 is where it starts to look a little bit more like a traditional school improvement plan with objectives and tasks to achieve those objectives and specific activities that will occur as a result of that plan. Many of the objectives here, or the indicators really, and then what goes with them, will become multi-year targets also. And then you can see the other 2 steps where they monitor the plan, adjust it if necessary, and then in December, as part of what will come to you, the entire process that they've achieved up to that point is submitted to the state. So why is every school in the district going to it? Something that Superintendent Bridges has brought up at the beginning of the year and has come through again and again is the idea that challenge is opportunity. That it's not necessarily something you overcome, it's something you engage in order to improve. So we knew of at least 7 schools over the summer that we thought were going to be slated to be required to engage in Rising Star for the year. We had 6 new principals, meaning 6 who would be engaging in a new school improvement process or an existing process at a new school. And the principal leadership and principal's development of the school improvement process is vital for a school's success. With the likelihood of every school having to move to Rising Star in 2014-15, it seemed wasteful to have these new principals start a new process and then a year later have to start another new process. So that was part of the thinking into how to turn challenge into opportunity. Finally, on the horizon in 2014-15 is the park assessments, the new assessments. And we foresaw making park testing successful, meaning that substantial investment on the part of the principals and the staff was going to be required. And it did not think that asking schools to move to Rising Star and park in the same year was going to really set them up for success in either of those. So those were some of the thoughts running through our minds as we saw this on the horizon. Then in the summer, in August, when we polled the principals about every school moving to Rising Star, the response was positive with that idea. The sentiment being that it made more sense for everyone to go through this together and share the learning and development on it than to have 7 schools and then 7 more schools and to do it piecemeal. Furthermore, while the school improvement process deployed thus far had some success, the consensus was that if this was done right, Rising Star represented a more rigorous, process-oriented school improvement experience. And finally, the research base and the wise ways represented a solid foundation for school improvement that we thought was worth engaging in. With every school engaging in the same process, using the same language, starting from the same position, it's been easier to build out professional learning for our principals that aligns Rising Star with ongoing professional learning that fit with our laws of school improvement and what we call the systems of practice. For example, this year at every Learning for Leaders session, we are working on deep content learning in culturally responsive practices that the principals can take back to their schools. So what we've done is we then align that to the district leadership team meetings when we talk about Rising Star and how would you build indicators and plans that would go with culturally responsive practices. And it's only through having that common language and common practice that we're able to make that really effective. How is it different than earlier processes? Its emphasis is on defined roles, required steps, and it does more to ensure that teams develop a shared assessment of the school's performance before moving together, moving forward together. And here you can see here the 3 defined roles: the team leader, the capacity building coach, and the process manager. And each of them is, particularly the process manager, is trained by Tim and Molly Farmer in assessment and how to maximize what the online process makes possible. The old system would examine data, determine goals, set up tasks, find research related to those goals and tasks, and then monitor. Rising Star, however, starts with research. And it examines the data of the school and the student achievement through the lens of that research, then determines goals, or in this case, objectives, tasks, and then engages in monitoring. Why will it produce a better process? One, it's rigorous. It's well defined. The online updating and communication sets you on a certain path, and it keeps everybody informed as where you are on that path, and then provides opportunities for feedback on that path on a regular basis. Its indicators are rooted in research so that as you monitor your tasks and objectives, you're always referring back to what that research told you about what you should be doing. Another reason why in 203 is that the collaboration resulting from every school being in Rising Star really leverages the collective wisdom of all the principals at the same time, including then cabinet level leaders who have been trained in Rising Star also. One thing I did want to mention, sorry, the liaison program at Cabinet. 6 of the Cabinet members, all of them have been trained, are official liaisons with principals in the school. So we have assigned to us principals, and we, on a regular basis, either right before or right after those Rising Star meetings at the schools, check in and do some reflective practice with the principals about how their teams are working out, how the process is working out. And it's a new opportunity not to just help the principals, but actually for Cabinet members then to get much more directive and immediate feedback about how the process is going. We take that back to Cabinet and talk about how we can do better in supporting the schools in their school improvement work. And here are the next steps, just so you'll know, and you'll know when it comes to you in December what's gone on. These are just deadlines that are related to when the indicators have to be fully assessed, the plan development, and when you'll be seeing the Rising Star plans that emerge from that process in December. And that's the summary. And if there are any questions, let me know.
Susan? Yep. Kane, thank you for your presentation. I almost feel like you're the vendor for Rising Stars, and that, you know, we've been given this presentation. Could you maybe use a few examples, how it, you know, what the wise ways would be for the elementary school, you know, elementary school X, it doesn't have to be a specific school, and kind of how the, you know, culturally responsive, which we're trying to build into everything we do. I mean, it's like, you know, you used every buzzword. Good job, you know, you get all the points. But could you turn it into an actual?
I probably should have brought an example of wise ways or posted, but I can certainly make sure I share that with you. So I'll give one. I don't know if I'll tie it into the culturally responsive practices, but there's, for instance, when we did the data spa with the teams early on, we did certain indicators and certain wise ways, including how teams function at the school level successfully. And so that one was relatively short, and it cited the best practices, including the source material that the teams could go look at in more detail. And then what happened basically is in reading that, they see what the criteria are that determine what's best practice for school-based teams to engage in school improvement. And they assess how are they doing on that. And some of them have already made adjustments as to how they're going to operate as a team, how they're going to monitor their own behavior as a team, including around how they report data, how they share with staff, how they run building meetings.
And weren't they doing this already?
They were doing a lot of that, but they weren't necessarily always doing it aligned with best practice.
Okay.
Sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't, but it also created a shared understanding from the get-go, starting in research, as opposed to setting a goal and then finding out what's the research that supports my goal. So that's one example.
So I'm going to need like a buzzword bingo sheet when you talk.
I'll try to.
I'm just teasing you. But how are the, you mentioned the people and the names of what their titles were. How are they trained? The process manager,
I think Tim can talk a little bit about the process
coach.
Manager training. I think that's the only one that goes through sort of base training at the district. Tim?
Yeah, we provide for the process managers a monthly training where we started out at the beginning of the year taking them through the basics of how to navigate the electronic system and learn about that, and then how to then take care of each of their teams in order to get the information out of the system and then to properly get it into the system. So, for instance, we met last month to talk about the compliance issues, about how to get the proper timelines taken care of. Next month, we'll have a working session where they'll actually get time to reference and work with us to get that material into the system, the state system.
So I guess what I'm trying to say is all the talking, how does this affect our kids in the school? Like how does that look in a third grade classroom?
Okay, so I think one example would be indicators that talk about instructional practice. Okay, the team would assess how the school is doing on those instructional practices that are best, that are the signs of a high-performing school. And if they assess that they're not doing as well as they could be, then they would then set an objective for themselves and tasks and activities related to that. It could be professional development, it could be classroom visits or the like.
I got one.
Mm-hmm.
There's an example of one, and I think I'm going to go with the one that Kane was on with professional development. And I think we have examples right now where our schools are assessing one of those indicators with professional development for the school, but also in that step in that process, they also looked at their data. And right now, with the changes in the assessment, we have schools who are specifically looking at math. So then if you take that down to when they open up and they read a Wise Way brief, that brief actually for this indicator is more tied to the type of professional learning that teachers need. It's not specific to math. However, that school is already looking at the data that they assessed on math, then they're using the best practices from the Wise Way brief, and then in addition to that, then they're gearing their professional learning. So on institute days, using their learning support coach, if it's that third grade classroom in the elementary, to work on the best practices in math.
Ultimately, we would expect that this process would impact what happens in our classrooms from a student achievement level. I mean, I think the best part about this for me is, and Kane hit on a couple of things, the level of collaboration I've seen among the buildings is much stronger and much better than what it had been in past years when schools were kind of letting. There was collaboration that occurred, but I don't think to the level that we've already seen and we anticipate continuing to see. Brings all of our principals together to be able to draw off the professionalism and the lessons that they've learned. So I think it really creates school improvement as an ongoing process rather than an event or a task or something that had to be done. And I think from the descriptions that you've heard is the constant assessment of how we're doing and what's happening in our classrooms should lead to that improvement that we would expect to see.
Are there specific categories of goals or things that our schools that are in the Rising Star process because of their status that they will have to meet, and will that be different than other goals that they'll have to, or I don't know. Are there categories of, like, for example, you mentioned the Smart Start indicator, the environment of the school being safe, welcoming, and conducive to learning. Do the requirements require, for example, that there be a goal that's set with regard to that particular indicator, or is it flexible as to?
No.
Okay.
You do have to assess on all the Smart Start and
You
Smart
assess on
Plan,
all of them, okay.
But you don't necessarily have to, you're not required to pull out of those for your plan, although I think the teams are doing very much that right now. However, you'll notice there are indicators around, sorry, I pointed to the screen, but around ELL and some other things. And in the process, especially as they build as a team, we would expect them to look towards those indicators because they're going to be looking at their data, of course, and that should give them some direction too.
So it's pretty flexible in terms of they assess on all the indicators, and all of our schools will do that regardless of whether or not they're required to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll determine their plan based on where they feel they need the most improvement?
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, and the part of the assessing process is for them to go through a prioritization process that the actual system assigns them an index score according to how they've rated a couple different categories. So For instance, they look at, for instance, the opportunity for change in that area, and they rank that. That gives them a part of a score that once you get through all the assessing process, gives them an index and allows them to prioritize which one to bring focus to their plan.
Most needs help, most has an impact for change.
Yes.
Questions? Michael?
I just want to say, it looks like a no-brainer to me. I mean, you brought up so many reasons why it'd almost be silly not to do it. And so I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad you guys are doing this. But also, I just anecdotally, having gone to some of these data spas, whatever we're calling them now, I forget what the trademark was. But the two things I noticed was it did vary sometimes quite a bit from school to school. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that the individual schools had bad outcomes, but the process could vary significantly. And I also I almost think it's probably the most profound change. Instead of, it seemed like in the past, you'd look at reams of data and try to pick out problem areas and solve those. Whereas now you're going and first defining and getting mutual buy-in on what the good practices are, what the best practices are, and then stepping back, are we doing that? And I think in the long run, that's going to have more profound change and positive change on our schools and therefore our student performance. So I applaud this. I think you guys are certainly on the right road, in my opinion. So thank you.
I think, Kane, listening to this, and I've been a parent on the side where we were part of the SIP goals and all, and a couple of things I thought were really, really valuable. The fact that, the cabinet folks, the people at PSAC are a part of this, because I think there was always an idea among some that there were the 22 buildings and then there was the mothership, and how do those all react? I'm sure you and your colleagues will learn a lot from the process. The other question I had, we've talked about the SIP goals. We had them. They kind of died. They got tucked away, and then the next year, depending on what was kind of shiny and special, the new thing came up. On these particular goals, the social and emotional are every bit as important as academic, but a school, there's some oversight to, I guess my point is, some schools that are doing fine, you have to, you're looking at academic goals there as well as social and emotional goals, but it's not just the school that can decide. Somebody's looking at the overall program of all the schools.
I mean, we're not there yet, but as we go through this process with Rising Star, I think as a group that meets monthly among the principals, and we'll assess that together as to how we're moving forward. But I'll give one example, culturally responsive practices, something that we're working on in professional development, and we're talking about how those are integrated into the Rising Star process. Mm-hmm. So, that's part of every conversation. So we fully expect to see that come out in those conversations that teams have at their schools about indicators.
Great.
So do we have a plan for what that looks like at the end? We really need to see how the process looks, but the important part is the rigor of the process will produce high performance based on the research that's been provided.
Right, and the reason I think that's valuable is great to have the team leader, the capacity builder, coach, and process manager, but if those few folks don't think that's important, but really it is important to the school community, there will be that, they're going to learn it, and it's a good thing, so
right, absolutely.
Everyone will. Great.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Great, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, our next report, I'll let our two high school principals move their way forward. Principal from Naperville North High School, Kevin Pops, Naperville Central's principal, Bill Wiesbrook, and then I'm not sure if Assistant Superintendent Bob Ross is coming forward or not. No?
Just going to bring a chair forward.
All right, that's what I thought, but
He's just
you
a
threw me
helper
off
guy.
guard there when you were coming up. Last April, representatives of both high school came forward to the Board of Education and provided you with an overview of updated academic integrity procedures that were in place at our high schools. The Board of Education had asked for a report to come back in the fall to talk about the next phase of that, which is implementation of it at the two sites. So our two principals are here tonight to talk a little bit about how they've begun to roll this out with their school communities, but then also kind of where they're at this year in the current phase and the next steps. So I'll turn it over to our two high school principals, Mr. Wiesbrook and Mr. Popst.
Thank you. I think you're leading off, Mr. Pops. we have a few slides, and we've tried to divvy them up between the two of us. The first one focuses on some background, because we're aware that when we presented on the 1st of April last year that 2 of the current board members were not seated. So we thought we'd give you a little bit of a background on the Academic Integrity Code. The first bullet up there says that it came about because there was a perceived need to teach academic integrity. The old code, I have the old student handbook where the old code is, and the student handbook this year that has the new code in it. The old code was a few sentences and basically said, if you cheat, you get a 0. And it was not a good teaching document. And one of the things we'd become aware of, and that other schools had become aware of as well, was that student understandings of what constituted cheating were very different than the understanding that adults had, both their parents and school personnel. And that particularly concerning was that students' understanding of cheating didn't match up with what they were going to encounter when they got to college. And that was the biggest concern to us, is that they wouldn't be ready for the way colleges deal with different kinds of cheating activities. As I said, the old language wasn't definitional or illustrative. The old language, there was one consequence, one tool to deal with this. So we went through a 3-year development process, and part of that process involved becoming part of a national survey. There's a professor at Rutgers University who runs actually an international survey, and he surveyed all of our students, 90-some% of our students, and then a very high percentage of our teachers. And then he actually adapted the survey for parents, because they'd never done that before, and surveyed parents. And so we had that input. And one of the things we were able to confirm was that the adults, both the staff and the parents, had a very similar understanding of what different cheating behaviors were, and that it was quite different than the students perceived it to be. Ultimately, we looked at what a number of schools had done and what we were hearing from our students and teachers, particularly with respect to what they wanted in the code. We ended up with a code that largely borrowed from New Trier and IMSA, so we attributed it to IMSA and New Trier, and in the student handbook, that attribution is accurate. So that's our background for how we came up with the code that was presented to the board as administrative procedures last April.
I'm going to talk a little bit about how this new code is being implemented. And I think if we can go to the next slide, that'll help me. Kevin mentioned that in April there was a brief Board of Education presentation about these new procedures. In the spring, at both high schools, there was dialogue with our staff and some dialogue, I know, at Naperville Central High School with students as well about this new academic integrity policy and steps and clarifications. And then at the end of the school year and throughout the summer, the 2 high schools came together so that we could be consistent in the way we were delivering this new academic integrity policy. And we felt that was very important. And I'm pleased to say that we are rolling this out consistently. Next slide. This is new. Everything that you see there is pretty much new. Both high schools have included the academic integrity policy in our student handbooks. All students receive the handbook at registration, and most students are in possession of it all the time. We also inserted in the famous registration packet the new academic integrity code. So for those parents that read through the packet and the students who might have read through the packet, they would have feasted their eyes on the new policy. We've also posted it on both school websites. It's there now. And then most importantly, early during the school year, we took a late start day, and on our late start days, we build into second period an extra 25 minutes that we set aside for something special.
And that 25 minutes was designated at both schools for students to hear about and learn about and talk about the new policy. So all teachers were directed to roll it out. We had a PowerPoint that we put together for all the teachers and present and answer questions about the new academic integrity policy. And then the last bullet mentions that we also sent out a Talk 203 email to notify parents of the new policy. I'm not sure if there's a next slide or not. Yes. So that's what we've done so far. Our next objective that's begun but not yet finished is to identify and modify practices that foster cheating. So we are engaging students and faculty in a dialogue about what we can do to reduce the incidence of cheating. There's a student committee being formed right now at Naperville Central. I'm not sure if yours is already formed, and a faculty committee and parent input as well to talk about what we can do. We will be examining practices of the school and classroom teachers as well to try to reduce the temptation for students to cheat. And after those committees have separately brainstormed some ideas, we'll bring those together and work on maybe new practices in classrooms that can reduce cheating infractions. So I think that's it, and we're here to answer any questions you might have.
Let me go ahead and begin. Just how's it going? Reaction, feedback, just overall, where are we at?
At Naperville Central High School, I honestly haven't heard a whole lot. The day that we set aside for this, teachers told me that they liked it, that we hadn't taken time out of school to really talk about and reflect and draw attention to this topic. No students stopped by in the hallway to tell me that they really liked it or that they hated it, so I really haven't heard anything from students. But the reaction for me from teachers and a handful of parents has been positive, and I'll let Kevin talk about North.
I could just say ditto. We haven't received any instance of negative feedback whatsoever. When we reminded our home and school, because they were aware of this, and the Booster Club and the SFCP, that this had been posted and they'd received it, they were aware of this and were generally affirming. We haven't received any student complaints or any parent complaints that we're aware of. This got talked about a lot over the last 3 years. So my perception, when I focus on, we haven't gotten any complaints, my focus, that's driven by the fact that over the last 3 years, we talked about this a lot. Mm-hmm. So the feedback that we got along the way, sometimes pretty copious, but there isn't anything new. I don't think it's viewed by a lot of people who are in the know as a new thing under the sun.
I mean, this comment is a sincere compliment, but for, as Mr. Ross has pointed out to me before, the fact that our two high schools work so collaboratively and closely together on a topic for 3 years is very positive. So, thank you.
Questions?
Well, can you talk to me a little bit about the preface?
I think you're talking to me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. When Jackie Thornton and I presented to you, we then went back to our schools and we continued to communicate with each other about ancillary messages that we thought needed to be addressed in order to introduce this to our students, because our students had input along the way, but the implementation, they hadn't been involved in talking about how to implement this. When Jackie and I talked, and we both have something that looks like a preface. Ours says preface and sits at the front of the website. Jackie's was a statement that was within a FAQ sheet that they used to introduce the code at Central. Our concern was that we wanted to have genuine conversations between faculty and students. And we talked about how sort of blunt, aggressive, directive we needed to be in order to get across the message that those conversations needed to take place and that it was very serious that they take place. There was a concern that the student reaction might be kind of that it was a good idea to have those conversations, a good idea for there to be dialogue, but that it wasn't absolutely necessary. And we wanted to send the message it was absolutely necessary. I think our preface is more blunt and more lengthy than Jackie's frequently asked questions response. That grew, where did that come from? That grew out of a meeting that we had about an October ago, 1 week, where our Booster Club leaders, our home and school leaders, and our SFCP leaders had their fall joint meeting. And we used as a focus group on the draft of the Academic Integrity Code at North that we had at that time. And in that, the parents were fairly out. There were some parents particularly, but in general, the consensus was that they were fairly clear to us that we needed to make it very clear to students what the expectation for them would be, what their expectation, and because there was a recognition that there's only so far teachers can go in imagining all the different collaboration techniques that might be out there with social networking and other kinds of things, and that teachers were in a difficult position to sort of imagine what all those would be. So there needed to be a dialogue between the teachers and the kids about, well, what do we have? What is acceptable here? A second thing it grew out of, in addition to those conversations last October, was response when Jackie and I went back to the buildings and said, okay, now time to implement. And we had teachers saying the same thing. We had teachers saying, we get it, this is a good document, it's a big improvement of what we had before, but how can I imagine all the different things I need to say up front when I'm making this assignment of this particular project or this lab report or this take-home test? How can I imagine all the different things I need to say to the kids? So we need the kids to be asking us, is it okay if, can I do that? What do you have in mind here? There needed to be a dialogue. So I wrote the preface, and I wrote it pretty bluntly, probably surprisingly to a lot of people because I tend to take the warm and fuzzy approach with most things. But I was pretty blunt about it because I wanted the message to be, these conversations are really important. They're really important. I do see, because it's been pointed out to me, that it could be read as shifting all the responsibility to kids, but that's not what we had in mind at all. That's not our intention at all. The document itself points to what teachers are going to be able to communicate to kids. And this phase 2 is very much about identifying things that primarily teachers are doing and that the school is doing that actually would give kids a position where they'd make a decision to cheat more easily. Some of them are pretty obvious what they are. Teacher not watching test giving when they're in the room, not creating new tests in certain situations, those kinds of things. But there are other subtle things about giving directions that are undoubtedly going to be talked about in this phase 2. We've, going into this, and I think the fact that we took 3 years to do this is sort of testament to this, we saw this as a living document, one that we were unlikely to get right the first time around. And we're quite open to working with the language and working the provisions depending on whether it turns out to be fair, depending on whether it turns out to be realistic. And so right now, the indicator that I have that maybe the preface was understood the way we intended it is that no one has come to us and said, no, this isn't okay.
So that being said, one of the things that I've talked to Bob Ross about in terms of working with the high schools on this implementation as phase 2 is a couple of things. Is one, throughout this process, ensuring that there is clarity of the language and what the meaning of all of it is, working to educate their students, their faculty, as well as parents on really what this means, but also the importance of the consistency of the application between the two schools, right, so that we have the same message. So again, as Kevin said, We're looking at this as living, breathing document, something that we have to learn from and learn through work with our students, with our faculty, and with our parent groups. And I'm encouraged by the work that they've already done and will continue to do through the course of this year to ensure that interpretation isn't made one way at one place, that there's consistency in terms of what it means, students' responsibility, faculty's responsibility, and how this is going to be best for our kids, as opposed to being some form of gotcha or stretching too far. The importance here is really, as the objective says on that phase 2, help our students and help our school community understand what integrity academically means, what it looks like, what it is, and what it isn't. So that'll be part of this work that moves forward.
Susan, I'm sorry, were you done, Susan?
Well, I just,
sorry
I think my concern about it is that frequently if we don't hear from people, it's not necessarily that they aren't concerned, it's that they haven't engaged it.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't think it's going to apply to them.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge with the preface is that depending on how it's applied, it could apply to a lot of kids. I mean, you're doing research on something and you decide to go to Google Scholar and you haven't gotten that cleared yet and you're just doing some reading on Google Scholar, but you haven't talked with your teacher about it. You don't, besides mentioning it in class that you looked on Google Scholar, you've used it appropriately, but that would apply. Google Scholar, if it wasn't discussed in class, is an okay resource. A teacher could say, well, you've broken the academic integrity code because you looked on a site that wasn't agreed upon in advance.
Yeah.
And so there's disciplinary. And
I can see what you're saying. One of the things that we have to see how it works out is what the intentions of our teachers are with this document, or whether they want to use it as sort of a gotcha document, a release from responsibility to identify the parameters that they'd like kids to work under. And I haven't seen any evidence that they're doing that. The other thing is we've been in school for 6 weeks now, and kids have been doing assignments and papers and things like that, and we just haven't had any students come forward and say, whoa, 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 you're kidding me. I can't use this. I can't use that. Let me tell you a little quickie story. I was observing last week in class, and it was a computer programming class, and in front of me were 4 computer screens, and then there were a couple of rows of kids. And the teacher was circulating through the room as he gave kids syntax issues to work through. And there were the 4 screens in front of me. The kid on the end had clearly had some programming experience, and he was trying to get the syntax right by experimenting with some other things that he'd picked up from some other programming. The student next to him was looking in the book and trying to see if there was instruction in the book. The third student was baffled. The fourth student had Googled it to see what the syntax was. The teacher came around and said, hey, I get that. That's very clever of you. And you can do that when you do these kind of things. But today in class, I'd really like you to not do that because I want you to problem solve without just finding the answers. I'd like you to problem solve. I'd like you to experiment on the end or read in the book, but work through it. We see the same thing with calculators. Sometimes they let kids use calculators in class and sometimes they don't. And it seems a little antediluvian not to let kids use calculators. But what they sometimes want them to do is they want them to reason through the calculations in their head and actually push the pencil around and do some of the calculations. I guess the upshot would be, Ms. Price, that I don't think our teachers are going to operate that way. And the other thing I would think, I get that not hearing complaints doesn't really prove anything yet. But I'm also pretty confident that the conversations we're trying to cultivate are actually taking place.
And that's great. My only concern about the breadth, again, in any policy that we do, is that we can say, we won't do that, we won't abuse that, we won't stretch it on, but you can't speak for future generations of administrators and principals. And if you've given people that power to do that, how they interpret using it in the future is not up to you. And that's why, language is always specific in contracts, because, while you may be very clear about it, in the future others may not understand the intention. And so having language that offers some specificity and less breadth sort of limits the power of, the man in the future.
I actually think that what's in the preface, boiled down, is what's on page 2 of the code. It's in the definitional part of the code. If you read that page carefully, I think they're actually compatible with each other. But again, I want to emphasize that this is a living document. And if we see as the year goes along that kids become vocal about unreasonable sort of anti-digital restrictions put on them, we'll react to that. And we'll work with Central to get the language right.
Follow up to that, since you brought it up. What's the difference in having a book on syntax, looking in the index for the section you're looking for, go on that page, and finding the answer there, or Googling it? And you just have, a billion more books and a much faster search engine than an index. It's ultimately the same information, except we come from a different generation where we started with books. Is it really fair to limit them that way?
Well, I took it to mean this. I took it to mean that when he Googled it for the actual syntax for that command, that's what he got.
But are we going to narrow it down that much? Or are kids going to have to ask, hey, can we study together? Can I ask my friend a question on Facebook to get ready for this test? Do we have to, if it's U.S. history, do we have to get permission to watch Ken Burns' Civil War? I mean, the way it's written, the kid has got to go, my God, what am I going to do to study for this test over the next week? Otherwise, I could get in trouble because I didn't think of it to ask the teacher. And I think she didn't say this, but, in my mind, kid's not going to ask you if you can Google it. And if that teacher, and I don't think most of them are going to be that disciplinary about it, but, the kids aren't going to come and ask for permission or what they think is just a natural way to study. I mean, theoretically, you have to ask for permission to go to the library and use an encyclopedia, according to the way I read it. And I don't think that was your intention.
No, and I don't think it'll be used that way.
No, but it reads that way. And I'm not saying the teachers won't, that all the teachers are going to implement it that way, but then why do we write it if that's not the intent?
We wanted to communicate to the kids that we wanted these conversations to take place and that they weren't just kind of a good idea. They were really necessary.
And you just said those conversations haven't been happening.
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's what I understood.
No.
I find it really hard to kind of discern where the line is. That's I think the biggest problem. If you're my teacher for science and you're my teacher for social studies, am I supposed to remember that it's okay to have a Facebook group in social studies but not in science, where the kids collaborate? I mean, that's just because we never did that way, and that's to Mike's point, that's kind of how we grew up. I have a hard time kind of figuring that stuff out. And then, could you talk a little bit about the self-plagiarism? Because every day at work, I self-plagiarize myself over and over. I cut and paste. No, really. So there is some use for it. But could you maybe, how do you define what that is exactly?
Let me partially answer first what I'm going to ask
Sure.
both of you to do, since you've indicated continued student input, continued student dialogue regarding the implementation of this through student groups that will be advising you on this. So you've heard some concerns from some board members about making sure that there's true understanding of what this means. Can you please make sure that that is part of the conversation? Do you understand your role? How can we help your role be clearer? Do you understand the role of the faculty members and the teachers in your classroom? What issues you're having regarding consistency of message and implementation from classroom to classroom? If we look at this as phase 2 of really trying to identify where our challenges are, I think that could be some good discussion to get the type of feedback that board members are asking you to make sure that we understand. So I would ask that that be a part of that, and then I'll ask you to go ahead and respond to either one of you to the question that Board Member Crowdy asked.
Self-plagiarism.
First of all, I think we know that each teacher has to exercise their judgment as best they can, and that unique circumstances will come along for each of them. And for the most part, our teachers are very good at that. I'm far from an expert on the definition of self-plagiarism. I think the idea is that if a student does a project in their sophomore biology class, and then as a junior, if they're asked to do a presentation or a project and the teacher wants them to learn new things, to go back and grab the one that they did last year.
So you can't turn in your Catcher in the Rye book report twice.
That might be an example of self-plagiarizing. Looks like Kevin has a...
The definition.
Not that anyone would ever have done that. But.
The definition of the code is submitting identical or substantial portions of similar work for credit more than once without prior explicit consent from the receiving instructor, which is essentially what you said, using the same book report twice.
Not that we even do book reports anymore like
No,
that.
I don't.
Susan? I'm good. Comment? Typewriter. Terry?
Just wanted, you guys done a great job on this policy. I know you put a lot of effort into it. But when you look at the preface and things like that, if you could back up and put yourself on a college level and somebody else looking on the website, looking at both websites. If I look at them right now, they're both different on the academic integrity. They're both formatted differently, and they both say different things between Central and North. And I think what you said about the college integrity programs being very rigid, that's how they're going to look at ours. I don't think I'd want a college going to Naperville North, going to Naperville Central, clicking on the top on where it says for parents, academic integrity, and have them both be different formatted. They need to be consistent, and they need to be the same, and need to carry the same message. We could argue the semantics of the preface, what it means and so forth. It's consistency of message that's really going to make the difference here for the kids when they go forward. So that when a college doesn't look at Naperville Central and look at Naperville North and say, well, the policies there are two different policies. And I like the one at Naperville North better because it has a preference that seems a little bit more stronger to me than what Central has. And I think there's a danger there that it may be remote, but there's a danger nonetheless. And I think that's what you got to focus on is the consistency of message so that the kids understand it too as well.
And I know a lot of time has been spent on this, and I too am very, very appreciative. And the reason I'm most appreciative, what our goal in District 203 is to get our students ready for the finish line, and that is post-secondary. And every college I've ever known, including the ones my kids have attended and are attending, the academic integrity code is so rigorous. There's no chance for explanation. You're out of the school, you're out of the class, you're out of the school. So the fact that our kids can learn this lesson in a gentle preschool type way in high school, I think is incredibly invaluable. They don't take any time to explain this in college. You just better know it. So I think I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled we're talking the talk. The teachers are having these conversations. I'm tickled about that. I think you both know, I think Kevin has heard that I was one of the ones that had a problem with the preface. Just the first reading of it in pure English, is it the student's responsibility? That's a little bit troublesome to me. And the reason I say that, not that a child's trying to be mischievous, how do you know? I mean, I Google everything. I mean, that's my first go-to. Maybe it's my generation. But what I want to make sure I understand, back when I was in high school, when you had Encyclopedia Britannica and World Book at home, we weren't told there were certain things we could look at or not look at, or go look at things at the library or not look at. So to Mike's point, how is the digital world any different? And I really, really, we all need to act like we're 18 or 16 or 14 and say the digital world is no different than the print world. And how would that look? I'm very encouraged that the teachers are working with the students and educating them, because at the end of the day, in high school, this is an education, as we've all said, and you both said, this isn't a got you. So I commend you. The more that this can be talked about, and whether they are in post-secondary, they go into a job-related field, ethics are huge. I'm tickled we're talking about it now. So thanks so much. Any other comments or questions? Kristen?
What I like about the preface, though, is how it directly addresses the students. It's the only place where you're looking, when you print out all those areas, that it specifically says the word students, like it's like you're speaking to them. And I think that is something that catches your attention. So I think it's a really important spot also given that it's a short page and the others are longer. So it catches the attention, so the wording is really important. I also really like how you've tied it back to the principles of honesty, responsibility, fairness, respect, and trust. I mean, they're the kinds of things that our kids are going to be judged on for their whole life, and so I like it that you've not just put the definitions and the consequences, but that you've also talked a little bit about the principles. So I think it's a very comprehensive policy with a lot of strengths.
Keep up the collaboration, John. Nope.
Excuse me.
The one thing that struck me as I read through it was the part about collaboration, and I think that we're trying to foster collaborative learners. And so I think that what was fuzzy to me on it is you have inappropriate collaboration, whether intentional or unintentional. And to me, if it's unintentional, I'm not sure they would know if it was appropriate or not appropriate. So I think that we try to foster collaboration. I think we just need to think about how a student would interpret. I mean, I know in some instances it's going to be obvious, like if you're, handing the homework over to somebody else, that's obviously inappropriate. But I think you've gone through and talked about a lot of these points, the cheating, the plagiarism, the self-plagiarism. I just think that the inappropriate collaboration is something that the students probably need a better definition on. So.
That's actually what I was referring to when I talked about how I thought that the preface, which I'll say again, is going to be examined. Clearly, right? It clearly needs to be examined. But that it was consonant with things that were in the definitional part of the code, and that's an example of it. I can think of several examples over the past 3 or 4 years where students did something collaboratively, usually electronically, that they said, whoa, really? That wasn't okay? The teacher hadn't imagined that they would do that, but when they had conversations about it, they could have a conversation about why that had undermined learning for some kids. I think the practical reason why unintentionally is in here for all 3 parts of the definition is that whenever we end up talking to students who've been accused of cheating in some way, it's always unintentional. And if we allow unintentionality, if there is such a word, to be a free pass, then all instances of violation of the integrity code that we see will be labeled unintentional on the part of the student. It seems kind of overbearing to do that, but there's no way to make the code work if we allow unintentional things not to count.
I guess the last thing I'd ask then, too, in terms of your continued work with, especially with your faculties and kids, is to continue to have that dialogue, not just that August meeting on the early release date. Continue to have the conversation with the whole student population, the faculty, about really what this is, what it means, and to Board President Romberg's point, why it's so important in terms of looking forward. So appreciate the work that you've done together.
I hear what you say about the preface.
Thank you so much. It's so valuable. Thank you so much for all your time on that. Truly, truly, truly. Next thing, I'm sorry? President's report, I do not have a report. Board of Education reports. Does anyone? Susan Carney.
I just have a quick one for NEF, and maybe it should have gone under our good news. But Don Newman, who's the chair of the Naperville Education Foundation, is receiving an award this week, the Kids Best Friend Award from the, let's see if I can get this right, from the Education Center.
Oh, okay.
And she was a home and school president at Ellsworth years ago. She also received Those Who Excel from the State Board several years ago, and we're just really proud of her. And
It'll actually be Friday the 18th.
Okay,
So not
Friday
this week,
the
but
18th.
next week, Friday the 18th.
Awesome.
I know Ann Spihar will be attending. I will be as well. So
great.
Yes, done.
I have a couple board reports. So as the board liaison to the home and school, I've been attending a number of the meetings. We've had 2 so far. They've been great. Our home and schools are hard at work, as you all know, but it's been great to be able to be a part of that committee and see all the various things that go on behind the scenes. So those have been great meetings. Another thing I wanted to report on as the Jefferson Adopt-A School was the Run for Life that was just done at Jefferson School. I was able to attend on Saturday. It was a great event, and they've raised almost $60,000 for the Children's Museum over the years that they've been doing that event.
Oh, wow.
So I thought that was just kind of a really neat event that they do. It promotes fitness, but it also is a really deserving cause. So
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Any other reports? Next, I'll entertain a motion for a consent agenda. Linda, second? Second. Okay. And if we could, oh gosh, what's wrong here? Okay, we have a motion and a second for adoption of our personnel report. Ann, I'll ask for a roll call, please.
Fitzgerald. Aye. Wonky.
Yes.
Fielded.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Yench.
Aye.
Crotty.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you. The next thing on our agenda, we have a number of things, discussion without action, and I will clarify for everyone on the World Wide Web as well as those that are in attendance. These are reports to the board from the administration, and there's no action on them tonight, hence the term without action. And thank you so much. So many of you that are here, I know are here and supporting some of these topics and questions that might come up. So thank you so much for your time this evening. And the first one is all-day kindergarten.
Okay, and as you said, our first item tonight is a presentation and a report on all-day kindergarten. And this is a team presentation and report. So we're going to have the team present from that back row of the table that you have here. There are multiple people that are involved in this presentation. I believe our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Hester, will be first, right? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to her in a second. But I just want to call to the board's attention, this is really the beginning of a conversation. We intend tonight to really give you an overview of the implementation this year with the introduction of this topic for consideration for expanding to our other 7 schools. You will recall, and you'll see this in one of the early slides, that when we did present last year, make the recommendation, we did indicate that it would, as the administration's intent would be to come back and begin the conversation with you about rolling this out at all of our schools for the next school year. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our team and let Dr. Hester begin.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to present the status on all-day kindergarten. Before we begin, I think it's time that we send some recognition out to all of our kindergarten teachers, and I say all of them, those who are implementing all-day kindergarten and those who are implementing the half-day kindergarten program. All of our teachers have implemented or are implementing new curriculum this year, and we want to send a thank you to them. In terms of all-day kindergarten, there have been a lot of players in the implementation. Our principals, in addition to our teachers, have played a large role. All the staff in the buildings. And then as you look around the table here at Cabinet, every department has played a role in supporting the implementation of our all-day kindergarten. So for tonight's presentation, we do have a large group here to present. And we have Jane Starrett, who is a kindergarten teacher at Scott School. We have Lynn Hens, who is a kindergarten teacher at Elmwood School, and they will be providing an update from their perspective. And then we have Kitty Ryan, our assistant superintendent for elementary education, Brad Kaufman, our Chief Financial Officer, and Tim Moranga, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Assessment and Analytics. And with that, the outcomes of our presentation are to review the recommendation for all-day kindergarten that was recommended to the board in December of 2012 and that timeline. We'll review everything that's been accomplished and everything in process for the sites and the staffing, the operation and logistics. We'll provide an update on the implementation of the curriculum, our update from our teachers, and then our program metrics and assessments, and then our expenditures on the all-day kindergarten in the 7 schools to date. So in December of 2012, this administrative team recommended that all-day kindergarten be implemented in our 7 Title I schools for the 13-14 school year. And at that time, we also stated that we would be coming back to the board to ask that all-day kindergarten be implemented in the remaining 7 schools for the 14-15 school year. So tonight's presentation, again, is an update and status on our implementation. And then on October 25th, we plan to come back to recommend all-day kindergarten for the remaining 7 schools. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Ryan.
Thank you, Dr. Hester, and I'm going to go ahead and just talk through some of the logistical and operational aspects of inaugurating all-day kindergarten. As you see on this chart, we did do that for the 7 schools listed, and we provided you with a comparison of their enrollment last year with their enrollment this year. It included the number of sections of kindergarten that were that we have in each one of those schools. The only thing that I'm going to call to your attention on this chart is the difference for River Woods, and you'll see a significant uptick in kindergarten students at River Woods, and that was because we had moved dual language from Maplebrook to River Woods, and that was the reason for that significant increase. Otherwise, you can see clearly that we're well within range for the other schools. In terms of logistics and operations, I'm going to ask for the next slide, and we'll take a look at those. These are just some of the things that we worked on providing for all of the schools that had all-day kindergarten this year, or rather that have all-day kindergarten this year. We made sure that classroom materials and furnishings were provided. Transportation schedules in terms of our bus routes were modified to accommodate the changes to all-day kindergarten and to provide busing for those families that chose the half-day option. We also looked with our schools at scheduling and logistical considerations, including lunchroom, art, music, and PE, etc. Each school identified a location for all-day kindergarten, a classroom. They recruited and recommended staff for hiring, and then revised building schedules, again, to include the changes that we needed to make. And as Jen talked about the role of the kindergarten teachers, here we see the significant contributions that our principals made. They banded together as a team of 7 and met several times so that they planned together and, in fact, implemented quite successfully all-day kindergarten in their schools. I turn it back to Dr. Hester.
Okay. Our math curriculum is currently being implemented. It received a large number of upgrades to make that curriculum consistent with the Common Core state standards. And in addition to that, we did purchase new resources to support some of the additional resources that we had so that they would be current with the Common Core state standards as well. For our literacy curriculum, that is a completely new curriculum, and that is in place, and all new resources were purchased for literacy as well. One of the things that we are most proud of with the literacy curriculum is that this curriculum definitely promotes our kindergartners as readers from early in the school year and as writers. Additionally, the social and emotional learning curriculum has been in place. That is a curriculum that is an all-day curriculum that is implemented throughout the year in multiple opportunities in kindergarten. We did present to the board that we were going to work on curriculum time increases in science, social studies, art, music, and PE. And our kindergarten teachers worked together over the course. They came together every month, and then they did some work in a summer institute to work on scheduling and to make those time increases happen. Additionally, the critical thinking, the application, and the reflection that we talked so much about in our presentation has been incorporated to all 3 of those curricular areas, but it's also incorporated throughout the day. In terms of assessment, we have assessments in place for math, literacy, and for the social and emotional learning. And Tim is going to update you on those more when he gets to the program metrics. And in terms of the instructional practices, through the professional learning, our teachers have engaged very much in professional learning for math, for the literacy implementation. But we also did focus on the intentional and the developmentally appropriate teaching. I think from the very beginning, one of the things that you'll know when you work with our kindergarten teachers is that they always have that in mind, and they're always thinking about what's appropriate for that 5- and 6-year-old student. For the culturally responsive teaching, that is something that we initially addressed through working on the social and emotional learning standards. But as we are working with our kindergarten teachers this year, we will address culturally responsive teaching more in depth with them as we move on. And if we can move to the next slide, I am going to turn it over to Lynn and Jane. Oh, you got one. Go ahead.
Kindergartners share. We'll share. In preparation for all-day kindergarten, kindergarten teachers met each month last year for professional learning, focusing on best practice strategies. During this time, we divided into 3 subgroups: literacy, math, and social-emotional learning. A key area of learning for us in the area of math and literacy was on developing a deeper understanding of the Common Core state standards. The social-emotional learning group focused on developing a social-emotional inventory in which we will be implementing throughout this year. A group of teachers also spent some time developing a plan on what a full-day schedule and a half-day schedule will look like for us this year. It was great to be able to come together last year as a district grade level to collaborate, to learn, and to reflect professionally. In addition to our grade level collaboration time, we also have the 2 committees that work throughout the year to prepare for these upcoming changes. Our district math curriculum committee worked throughout the year to upgrade our current new math curriculum to align with the Common Core state standards, to modify our assessments, and to create district math maps to guide instructional decisions. Our district literacy curriculum committee worked throughout last year and over the summer to review and recommend our resources, conduct professional reading, and create assessments, as well as unit maps for reading and writing, with a focus on aligning to the Common Core state standards.
Last spring, we were fortunate to meet for an afternoon with kindergarten staff from District 204, and they were wonderfully collaborative. They shared schedules with us, what to expect from all-day kindergarten, and tips for meeting any challenges that come from all-day kindergarten. We also spent a week of professional learning this summer, it was referenced earlier. Both outside consultants and teacher leaders from the district came to facilitate our discussions and exploration of the literacy, math, and social emotional resources and curriculum. It was a wonderful opportunity to look deeply at our materials and to collaborate as teams and across buildings.
As we talked to all of our kindergarten teachers that are implementing full day, it was unanimous that time has been the biggest gift to both the teachers and the students in terms of implementing our new literacy and math curriculum. The additional time we have in all day has allowed many opportunities for differentiation for all students. For example, in guided reading, one group of students may be working on letter recognition and letter sounds, while another group of students may be reading a grade level text and then retelling that story to a peer. All the while, the rest of the students are engaged in a reading workshop throughout the classroom.
We have so many more opportunities to develop our students as self-directed learners. They have more time to practice being independent and to learn to take the initiative to know what comes next. They are learning to be responsible for their learning during this independent work time.
Our math time this year has increased to 75 minutes. During this time, we were able to do quick practice activities, data collection, a daily focus lesson, and learning centers. Another activity we were able to do, which has allowed students increased time for inquiry and higher level thinking, are math tasks, which allow students to solve math problems with multiple ways to answer the problem. Additional time in all-day kindergarten has also allowed us more time for responsive teaching. Because of this, we were able to adhere to one of the 7 key principles of a responsive classroom, in that knowing the children we teach individually, culturally, and developmentally is as important as knowing the content we teach.
Spending the whole day with our students allows us to get to know them and their families more quickly. Students are social and emotional beings, as we all are, and the sooner we can become familiar with them, with their experiences and expectations, the sooner we can design effective instruction. Additionally, kindergartners are far more a part of things in the building in an all-day program. We're in the lunchroom, we're out at recess, we're hearing announcements, we're seeing friends and siblings interacting with staff. Our students are showing a sense of belonging and confidence moving through the building already. We've been talking a lot about the advantages of having more time, and hand in hand with that goes pace. We can move through our day in a much more relaxed and less hurried manner. It enhances the environment in our classrooms to transition from subject to subject and activity at a calmer pace. We can process our learning and move on to our next activity. And I think Lynn said she goes like this a lot less. Let's go. Huppity up. We're also finding that establishing classroom routines is happening very quickly. There's way more time to be practicing that, and we're moving beyond establishing our routine and into instruction far earlier in the school year.
Well, we've talked about the many benefits of all-day kindergarten. Now we will briefly talk about what we like to call our welcome challenges. All-day kindergarten has created many collaborative opportunities for teachers as we've created our new daily schedules.
And in each building, flexibility has been required as teachers work together with support staff and administration to establish new building routines or modify, adjust, change new building routines such as the lunchroom, drop-off and pick-up procedures. And we have seen significant growth quickly in our kindergartners. They're truly functioning as well as first graders. And we definitely view, as we heard earlier this evening, challenge as opportunity.
In conclusion, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity for us to share the benefits and successes we have experienced in our first 31 days of kindergarten.
It's only been 31 days. It has been an exciting and energizing time for all of us.
I overheard one of my kindergartners today say, "Kindergarten rocks," and we would have to agree.
Could we have the next slide, please? I'd like to talk a little bit about the program metrics that we've established for this program. The kindergarten metrics have been expanded this year to aid in measuring the success of our students. The Illinois Snapshot of Early Literacy, which is the ISIL, has been administered to all of our students in the entire kindergarten program. These snapshots include letter recognition, phonemic awareness, and letter sounds. The Math Performance Series is in its first year of availability from Scantron. We are participating in every all-day kindergarten school. These scores will align with other grades in a scale score. The Mathematics Committee also wrote common assessments that involve the teacher checking the numeracy skills of our students. In an inventory, they administered the first trimester assessment in our new assessment system called Mastery Manager, which is being implemented at all grades for our common benchmark assessments. And then last year, as was mentioned before, the Kindergarten Committee studied the social emotional standards and developed a list of over 20 indicators. This year, those indicators were streamlined down to 10 indicators. Teachers will fill out the first inventory of these indicators this month.
Next slide, please.
There we go. I'm just going to talk through with the monitoring and program metrics. Additionally, with the curriculum, one of our goals is that the district core curriculum is implemented as written, and our core curriculum is being implemented. Our major source of feedback on the implementation of that curriculum is obviously our kindergarten teachers, but it is also our building principals. And then the next indicator is that culturally responsive practices, which I reported that we are in the process of still working with the teachers on that. And then our time allocations provide for increased learning. In terms of our time allocations, the teachers have all worked on their schedules for the time allocations, but one of our indicators to look at is feedback from the teachers on how those time allocations are going. Are we able to dedicate more time to science and social studies in addition to the increased time that we know that we're implementing in literacy and math?
Okay, next. All right, thank you. Now it's my turn.
Save the best for last, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. But anyway, when reviewing the operational costs, the first thing you will notice about this slide is we've removed from reviewing the fiscal totals in order to be able to provide the complete cost for the program startup and operational. So regardless of which fiscal year the cost is falling, whether receiving revenue or a cost incurred, we're summarizing them into the two different columns. So the first is the projected, and then the estimated actual, and then the variance. The thing to note on this is we're projecting a $44,000 negative variance overall based off of our projections. There are many factors that lead into this. Some of these variables were beyond the district's control. For example, we had estimated we'd have 530 students attending these all-day kindergarten programs. In reality, we had 515. Not much of a difference, but it did have an impact on our general state aid that we'll be collecting. Another big factor for the district is we had anticipated the state of Illinois would provide 100% of the general state aid. As you know, they've now prorating it 81%, so a 19% deduction from us. And then finally, some other things that did come in on exactly and targeted. We'd estimated to have 23 sections, and we did indeed do that. And we have projected to have 11.5 FTEs, and we are right there too, full-time equivalents. So overall, one of the biggest operating factors is the difference in our salaries. We had projected some average costs for teachers, and that was an assumption of bringing in some new teachers, but we brought in teachers that worked best in the program and had some more experience. And so we captured and reporting to you here tonight the actual cost for those people participating. So that's $129,000. Overall, though, I think that it's very firm. We are going to be $44,000, which is only 4%. And based on some of these things that were beyond the district's control, I think the things that were controllable, the district's done a very good job in keeping those in line and within that budgeted projection. So with that, we'll entertain any questions.
Questions? Susan?
I want to go back and be a kindergartner again. It just seems so awesome. Can you address a little bit the half-day program that's going on as well, and how to keep the kids equal without a full-day program?
Yeah. So I think one of the important things to remember is that in both our half-day program and our full-day program, we have the same curriculum. And that means when you get down to what kids need to know and be able to do, that content and that skills are the same in both programs. The other thing that we have are the same resources for both of those. In addition to that, then what we have to do, then what we work with is the time factor. So we had, I'm looking for. We had one of our, a couple of our half-day kindergarten teachers came in and worked with the curriculum maps and then also with the schedules. And then in that, they looked at some of the high leverage areas in the curriculum. And then when we have our kindergarten meetings, we have opportunity for the all-day kindergarten teachers to meet and then the half-day. So then what the half-day kindergarten teachers are doing is working within that schedule. And I'll highlight one of the things that I think I heard Lynn say, unless you want to go ahead.
There's, for example, with literacy and reading, there's 4 units. There's a launching unit, a fiction unit, a nonfiction unit, and a poetry unit. And so this summer when we were developing our unit maps, we worked with the half-day teacher, and they decided to keep the launching unit, the fiction unit, and the nonfiction unit, and then the poetry unit is going to be embedded into their shared reading time. And so then that unit and all of the standards that go with that unit are going to be embedded, so they're still reaching those standards, but they're going to be embedded into the shared reading time rather than.
Interesting.
And that same strategy was used for science and social studies. So you'll see a lot of content from science and social studies integrated mostly into literacy, but also into math where appropriate.
Other questions? Go ahead, Kristen.
One of the challenges, it seems like, with kindergarten is the kids that come in a variety of different levels. So you have some that this is their first experience with school, and some who are already reading chapter books even when they come into kindergarten. So I was very interested to hear your comments about the differentiation and the ability of all-day kindergarten. Can you expand a little bit on that in terms of both the literacy and the math, how you're able to utilize the time to really give the students learning that is appropriate to their level?
What's interesting is we had that range of levels coming in, whether or not it was
Right,
full day or
for
half
sure.
day.
And you still will,
And
yeah.
what's great is now we have even more time for that differentiation during our day. And so we have guided reading, guided practice groups going for literacy, where during that time Not everybody may be doing our guided reading groups, but some may be doing extra practice for their letters and their sounds during that time. So it's nice to be able to pull a group and practice doing those letters and practice doing those sounds. And whereas another group might be coming over and they're reading a level F book, and they're doing a guided reading lesson during that time. So it's nice to be able to have that time and meet with a couple different groups during that time.
And similarly in math, we do a guided math model so that we can pull small groups and target their specific needs, numeracy, number identification, one-on-one correspondence, things like that. And at the same time, they're working at different levels on different activities that are directly targeting their holes or what they need in math.
We also have a Words Their Way program where it's also differentiated. And so we have lots of different groups going in that. So one group may be doing a letter sort where it's just on the beginning sound of one individual letter. Another group may be doing an at family. One group may be doing a sort on the short vowel sound. One may be doing digraphs. So I've got 4 different groups going with that as well. I didn't have that last year because of the resource and because of time.
And Writer's Workshop is always just naturally differentiated. Some students are telling their story through pictures, and some students are labeling, and some students are even starting to write sentences. 31 days.
Thank you.
Yes, to 100 Day. I just wanted to summarize, or have our superintendent summarize our next couple steps. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you so much. It is so rich and so beneficial to me, a non-educator, to hear from teachers that are actually, were with children a number of hours ago, and to hear the stories. So thank you so much. The other administrators are here all the time trying to help make that connection for us. So we're grateful, or I'm grateful, that you were able to come tonight and just share those experiences. It's been really helpful for me. Any other questions, and then we'll let our superintendent.
I think it's for Tim, but I'm not sure. Is there? I think what I understood was that the performance series math was not being used with the half-day students. Is that right?
Only on a voluntary basis.
Okay.
So what we might do is, let me use, reading's probably a little easier to understand, but it can be used in different ways. Since it's a first year performance series is being offered, it's being used in some cases as optional. So they might see at the half day if a student is shown good numeracy skills, and then be able to maybe try the performance series to see how the student might do in that area. So not to give it to every student in that area.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions?
Okay. As Dr. Hester indicated at the beginning, on October 21st at our next Board of Education meeting, we intend to once again come back to the Board of Education with a discussion without action item to prepare and to present a recommendation to you for your consideration of introducing all-day kindergarten in all of our elementary schools, beginning with 2014-2015 school year. We'll model that presentation and report to you off the presentation we did last year, which will be an overview of how it will be done in each of our schools, the operational, logistical, and financial costs associated with that introduction. And then we would hope for potential action by the Board of Education at the November 4th meeting. So again, we'll come back October 21, have conversation, information, and recommendation for you to introduce it in all of our schools, and hope for action on November 4th.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Nice job. Thank you.
Next subject, online blended learning plan.
Great. In a couple board meetings ago, administration presented to the Board of Education an update on work that we've been doing with 4 other school districts on an online and blended learning consortium. We indicated to you we'd be coming back in our October board meetings for the October 7th with your first reading or for review of an intergovernmental agreement with those other 4 school districts. So you have that draft. It has been reviewed by legal counsel and found to be appropriate. Dr. Hester, do you have any additional comments regarding the agreement?
Just that we are hoping for the approval of the agreement so that we can support the work that we're doing with the online and blended learning per the recommendation from our consultants from ISB.
Any questions on that? Okay, great. And then next, I'd like to call forward our Director of Curriculum, Jane Willard, who has some information, a brief presentation for you regarding new courses that are proposed for the future. So, Jane, if you want to come on up and provide the information for the board, that would be great.
Double blue lights.
Okay. There we go.
It should be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It'll be a different view on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
They have it in board docs too. You can go ahead, Jen.
I know. Okay. Good evening. Tonight we are here to recommend new courses and also title changes at both of our high schools for the 2014-2015 school year. The first thing we will do is talk about the recommendations for our new courses. As you know, last year our teachers engaged in curriculum development, all based on Common Core state standards for English 1, 2, 3, and also for Honors English 1 and 2. This year, our recommendation for Honors English 3 will continue that alignment. This course will increase text complexity, written composition, and also student discussion. Our next courses that we will be recommending are AP Physics 1 and AP Physics 2 courses. These are direct changes from the College Board, which require our changes right now. When you look at AP Physics 1, this course will actually replace our current honors physics course. This is the first in the AP Physics pathway, and it will be equivalent to our first semester college physics course. Our second recommendation for AP Physics 2 actually will replace our current AP Physics B. This is the second course in the sequence. Again, both courses will be year-long, and this will be the equivalent to a second semester college-based physics course. Those are our new course recommendations for the 2014-15 school years. I'm going to transition to our title changes right now, and these are just course title changes. All of these are based off of our English Comm Arts department and really a result of all of our work we did last year with our Common Core upgrade and our alignment within these departments. When we look at our first course that of essay writing, the new recommendation will be to change that course to senior rhetoric. Our second course, honors essay writing, will change to honors senior rhetoric. Our film analysis and composition, the recommendation is to change this as film as literature. And then our last course title change would be Western Humanities at Naperville North, Western Literature at Naperville Central, and we will change that course to Themes in Western Literature and Art. We feel these courses better reflect the integration of the Common Core 4 strands of reading, writing, speaking and listening, and also our language strand. As I open it up to questions, I also want to let everyone know that we have staff in the audience today. Jeff Howard is here from Naperville North, assistant principal. We also have Mike Doman, our instructional coordinator for the Comm Arts Department at Naperville Central, Andy Simon from Naperville North, both who were very instrumental in the integration of speech within our new courses, and then also Catherine Seguino, instructional coordinator at Naperville Central, to address some physics questions. Right now, I'll open it up to any questions regarding our new courses or our recommendations for our title changes.
Okay, so you said that the AP Physics 1 is going to replace Honors Physics, correct?
Mhm.
So, and if this is implemented next year, and the AP Physics 2, you said was replacing
AP Physics B.
B.
Mhm.
I don't have that one in my book. Why is that? So it's different than AP Physics C?
That is.
Okay.
It gets prior to that.
Oh. But those are both your courses?
Both year-long
So
courses.
is it like comparable to like a AB, BC calculus? Like, is that how that works? I don't know what, like.
When we look at the AP Physics 1 and the AP, it's the way our rationalization to, as we recommend this, was we knew we had the AP Physics B. We didn't feel like we just wanted to recommend a B or a 2, I'm sorry, AP Physics 2 without offering the AP Physics 1. We felt like that would streamline the transition and the offering more cohesively.
So will the AP Physics C still be offered as well?
That will still be offered. That has not changed yet.
Okay.
Yeah, there's three AP exams.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
There will be the AP Physics 1, AP Physics 2, and then the AP
C.
Physics C.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I think
It's
the question
confusing.
on the side.
A question. Just looking at the physics part, and if you want Jen or whoever, but my question was, how many kids get to that AP Physics when you start with DES? And kind of the regular progression doesn't allow you to get there.
I'm going to open that also to Catherine Seguino. I will ask her to come up. She has more numbers on exactly how many students take that.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Your question was how many students take APC or
Well,
AP?
because we start with DES, and so then the natural progression would be DES, then chemistry, then bio, then physics.
Right now, yes.
So that's the regular progression, and then we have all these other science classes. How can we get? I guess my question is not how many. How can we get more kids to those upper level classes?
Under the current structure, if we went to AP Physics, AP2 or AP1 and 2, that structure right now, then the students who would take honors physics in the progression that you're talking about from DES on, I would say that probably I teach honors physics, and within honors physics right now, that would be changing to the AP1. Can this be any more confusing?
No.
I would say that probably right now with honors physics right now, we probably have, I would say, at least 30% or more seniors in that class. So if we stayed with the current structure, then we would probably have 30 or more percent of that class now being able to take an AP course, which they wouldn't have before. So if that makes sense. The students who start in honors chemistry as a freshman, then they have an opportunity, actually anyone has an opportunity to get to the APC as we have it now, but those students need to have calculus either prior to or concurrently. So that's a different subgroup altogether. But we do have AP Physics B currently. I'm so sorry. I would really like to talk to the board and just talk to them and say, could you call them something different? But our Physics B currently, we have one course at North and probably two courses at North and one course at Central. So that's probably 75 students currently that take it. Now,
I guess what I was asking you, I'm good with the numbers.
Okay.
But how do you get more kids into those paths of those upper level classes so that they have the opportunity to discover the sciences that they really like, or that they, if you never take a biology, you don't know.
Dr. Hester actually respond to that one in
Okay.
terms of where we're at.
So as we move forward in looking at science in the future, one of the things that I think we're all interested is opening up the opportunity to increase the number of kids who can experience higher levels of science classes
That's what I
in
wanted
the
to hear.
pathway.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
what I.
Everyone won't be, if you're not recommended in junior high to take honors chemistry, isn't that the way it goes? Honors chemistry first, then biology. DES will not be the fallback. There can be other things, or they can jump to a regular chemistry class or biology class, and to Susan's point, get to some of these these other classes, astronomy. There are a vast amount of science classes out there.
And then Jen, I have one more question for you. In the past, we've been so excited about some of the new classes that were brought forward. When you look at the class list, the mass media and the special topics classes. Like, I didn't see any this year.
I think that's because we're really in a stage where we are trying to create great efficiencies in our efforts. So when I say that, what we're really looking at, I think
Jackie Thornton and Jeff Howard and I talked to you last year, to the board, about a course audit process. And the purpose of that process is not to take away choice or streamline it so much that there aren't interesting opportunities out there. But the purpose of that course audit process is to really look at what courses out there have endurance. What courses do we think will provide content that will last kids and interest them, so that you want to get into a science pathway and you want to stay and let's hope they want to take it for 4 years. The next one is readiness. We want to make sure that our courses are designed so that they help kids to be ready either for the very next level of learning, the next course, if it's science in that pathway, or readiness, which is one of our major goals here, is college and careers. The other thing is leverage. We want those courses to be able to leverage core concepts that can be used in other disciplines. So when you think about the literacy that runs throughout every discipline, when you think in science, the connection that happens with engineering and with math, we want those leverage points in our courses. And then the last one is relevance. Our courses need to be relevant for the kids of today, and we try as much as possible to keep our eye toward the future. So that's really why you're not seeing a lot of courses coming forward. There will be courses that come forward in March, but the idea there is that we are really focusing our efforts on those 4 areas.
So that's not gone forever. It's just
Right.
okay.
Okay, now I understand what's replacing what. I still don't, I'm sorry, still don't understand the progression. So can you tell me, if a student took honors physics?
They would now be taking Physics 1, AP 1. It would just replace it.
Right, I understood that replaced with, how do they progress through the next 2 then?
They would either go into AP 2, which is more of a broad base. Actually, it's special topics in physics. It's actually a pretty cool class. And the other one is AP Physics C, which would be a calculus based. So it would be a choice,
They
either
have a choice.
or.
Oh, okay, that's
you
what I was
really
missing.
wouldn't take all 3.
Okay.
I mean, unless you had an infinite amount of time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in your course descriptions, there's a couple spots where you have bolded that requires a summer reading project. I just wondered why you have highlighted that.
Summer read. Our teams really feel that they want to value those summer reads, and they want students to be aware that that is something that's there. Now, definitely, most students come in prepared with the summer read, but if they do not, they do offer that first semester that they complete that as well.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one more question. And it's curiosity more than anything. You touched upon it briefly. Last year, you changed a bunch of the course names so they were actually more mainstream, like English. And now you go from essay writing to senior rhetoric. But, when I read the description, I go, it looks like essay writing. And I heard what you said about the 4 strands, but there's one word in the honors senior rhetoric that mentions basically speaking, but really nothing in the first one. If we're not really changing the course, or are we? I mean, why did you feel the need for this if the emphasis is still essay writing?
When we had the same question with the ICs, we said, as we look at essay writing to senior rhetoric, and a lot of what was communicated in discussion were that students are actually picking courses based on the title, not always a description. And so when they saw essay writing, they just assumed that they were only writing essays, where in reality they were doing reading, and they were having discourse, and they were engaging in speaking and listening, but they went straight toward that course title. And so with these course changes, they wanted to make them more comprehensive, so it really got at the full content rather than just a skills-based content.
Of course, with a title like that, most of your students are going to be reading the description, and they're still going to see essay writing. So.
Right, they'll see there.
Okay, well, see what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And I think this is maybe a question for the administrators, but Jane, we sometimes have had course descriptions that are not recognized by IHS, or, you know, the D1 schools or different colleges. Somebody's vetted that, so these are acceptable titles. Everybody will be happy for post-secondary.
Yes,
well, that's happened where they look at the title and they say, "Oh, I don't like that title."
Yeah, this process is where the ICs develop these descriptions. They then present those to Jackie Thornton and Jeff Howard, and they make sure that it's vetted and that they are absolutely be approved.
Thanks so much.
Okay?
Very informative. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, our next online payment. Yes?
Okay, actually, I think we're going to present.
Interrupt you real quick.
Yep.
As Mike stands up especially. It can be at another time. We anticipated there may be some questions on speech implementation. We have a couple of teachers here that can speak to that. We do that at another time too, if you'd rather. All right.
Oh.
Okay, Mike.
Sure.
Go ahead. Mike, just kind of a brief overview, just kind of how things are going, reaction and thoughts with the changes that came in the course proposals from last year.
My name is.
We are such proud of that.
My name is Mike Doman. I'm the instructional coordinator for communication arts at Naperville Central.
And I'm Andy Simon. I am one of the teachers at Naperville North. It was also part of the speech subcommittee with Mike and two other teachers that were asked to look at speech integration into the curriculum with the new Common Core.
One of the things we did this summer as the literacy curriculum team was working on English 1, 2, and 3, Dr. Hester called together two teachers from Central, myself and Kim Erickson, two from North, Karen Quinn and Andy, to take a look at how we could take a huge undertaking, which was the integration of our sophomore speech course into English 1, 2, and 3. So the four of us were able to carve out some time during that summer work to really start thinking about how logically to take what had been that semester-long intensive and put it into those courses in a way that we could ensure that our students were coming out of that process with the same proficiencies. So that process, maybe Andy can talk a little bit about that process.
What we did is we took the standards that had been established previously for our speech courses, and we worked with the Common Core speaking and listening standards, taking some of the speaking and listening standards that would work for more of speeches as opposed to
because we all had a part in this. So we're going to go briefly through the just the summary presentation and then answer any questions that you have. Go to the first slide. Just the outcomes, this is what we're going to cover. The current process for payment of fees, the advantages of a single site, financial aspects, technological aspects of adoption, the examples of RevTrack online payment, the recommendation, and the next steps. The current process for payment of fees by credit card. In addition to paying in person by check or cash, there is online credit card payments that can be made in the district for the following things that we've tracked. There might actually be a couple more out there. In the process of looking into it, we found little places here and there where groups in the district were running online payment. So we're not sure that we got all of them, but here are a number of examples. And in some of these, you could pay a fee. Some of these you might. The fee would differ. And then in-person credit card payments can be made at the high school registration in August, but not online, only when you show up and you can go in and pay by credit card in a room. The advantages of having a single site for online credit card payment are foremost convenience. It's just simply in this day and age to be able to go online and pay those fees, you know, from the comfort of your home. Maybe it's late at night, you're in your jammies, you got stuff to do tomorrow, you can do it. Any number of other scenarios that are more convenient and are available to people. There is a potential for a reduced expense too. I say potential because it depends on which online payments parents are making right now for what things. compared to what they would be if we went to a single online site. And it also depends how efficiently they then use that site. If they can try to get all those payments for a child or more than one child done at one time, then the relative expense goes down for them. For District 203, there's a reduced need for processing payments because it becomes much simpler when it's pushed through this RevTrack system or any online system. And there's a more accessible tracking of payments and matching of the payments to the fees because it's all loaded into basically one file. We did look at 2 vendors in particular. We looked at others, but these are the ones we gave closest scrutiny to. FrontStream, we looked at, and some highlights there were that they could not integrate with Infinite Campus. In fact, I'm not sure that we came across any other vendor that could integrate with Infinite Campus. And the fee for total volume is there, as you see, at 3.68% of the total volume of sales. RevTrack does integrate with Infinite Campus. The fee is 3.49% of total volume. And the estimated expense for that in year 1 we wanted to point out would be approximately $45,500, and I think that's on the basis that if in the first year 50% of the payments were made online, that's what it would cost. We are recommending a fee offset of user convenience of $195 per transaction to offset that cost. And I know, Brad, you've looked up an example of what users are paying now for lunch fee payment. You want to talk about that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, you would ask yourself, why would a parents want to participate in doing this? So I pulled our current lunch program, which I think is a very good example of why parents prefer this. Currently, you can use in the district My School Bucks, which charges $2.50 per transaction or checkout. And currently, about 40% of our revenue comes through that My School Bucks. So the parent could choose to send a check to school at no fee, just send it with their student, or they could go online and make that payment. And the parent chooses, because of the convenience and whatever else, to go ahead and do that process and spend $2.50 per checkout.
And so by adopting, for instance, RevTrack as a single site and a single source, they could pay not only for student fees and for other costs that we can put up there and talk about, but that we can put the lunch fee payments on there too. So they would ultimately be paying less for their lunch. That convenience fee would be less than what they're paying now. These are some of the technological aspects that we thought were important to highlight. RevTrack does integrate with Infinite Campus. Additionally, there's an ongoing interface support and maintenance. You want to talk a little bit about that, Roger, what that means in detail?
Basically, the interface was created by the company that supports our Infinite Campus installation, CIC, and whenever Infinite Campus is upgraded or enhanced, they will keep and maintain that interface in working condition to match the upgrades and releases. The other thing about this, it's pretty neat, is that when you're in the web store, which Kane's about to show, I believe, a sample of, you will punch out, there'll be a menu item for Infinite Campus, and you'll select that. And then as soon as you do that, that takes you to your Infinite Campus portal sign-on. And when you sign on, a parent will automatically see the fees that are in there for their students. And then they can click a little box of all the fees, select which ones to pay, make partial payments, and then they can punch back out and continue shopping and pay other fees that the RevTrack system might be integrated with or hooked to. So they can have one session and pay different types of fees, whether or not it's Infinite Campus or not.
Additionally, and we'll show you examples, the web store, which is where you go to make the payments, overlays with our current website perfectly, and it will with our future website too. We've already made sure of that. It's basically a link. It won't look like a link. It'll look like you're going to another page with our information on it, but it'll integrate smoothly with our current website and our future website. There is an initial setup fee with the software vendor. I believe that's outlined in the more detailed memo I gave you. It's $5,500. That's a one-time fee to set up and get everything up and running. And here I just wanted to show you, you could see it before, this is an example of Elmhurst 205 and their web store. You can see that you can go there and choose from any number of sets of fees depending on what your student's involved in and what school they go to. Let's see. And this is an example, go to the next one, please. An example from the middle school. And you can see here they can pay for fees, they can pay for extracurricular fees. And honestly, you can put pretty much any fee on here you want to put on here. There might be some exceptions, like if I'm buying a class ring or something from an external vendor that you'd still have to. But by and large, we can put on any fee we want and really create true convenience, including event fees. One-time events can be sold on here, even by school, if it's a one-time event at a school. So, and here's just an example of how they sign on. And we've all done this, right? We've all gone somewhere and said, let's look at what's in the cart now. I'm ready to pay. I'm not ready to pay. So it's an experience that really our families in the community are expecting to have, and they're not yet having it here. And this is how we would go about giving that to them. So the recommendation as it stands is that the board approve of the adoption of RevTrack as the single method for online payment, including the $195 per transaction convenience fee to offset the cost of this solution. And what's assumed in this is that the adoption is a migration. It wouldn't like we'd wake up tomorrow and have everything in there and ready to go. It takes time to train the staff and to decide which events and which fees we put in there over time, and then to test them out. And it's better that we test them out as we go along to make sure that they're integrating properly and that our users give us feedback on how it's going. So we would have a timeline that we would establish for migrating over.
I would only add in, and I would hope, you may know this, may not, so I just want to point this out. This recommendation doesn't say that this is the only way we will now collect these fees.
Correct.
So if family members choose to process their fees in more traditional ways, that's still acceptable. This is an opportunity, as Kane and the team is really convenience in putting it all through one single source as opposed to multiple sources. So
check and cash are still.
Okay. Cash is always good. Okay. Well, so the team will take any questions that the board may have at this time.
I have a question, Kane. When you look at the fees, like for Front Stream at 3.68 or for RevTrack at 3.49, that's the percentage that the credit card company gets?
That is correct. So that
sorry.
is
that the credit card
Sorry,
company
Brad.
or the vendor?
Right, that the credit card company receives.
So that takes care of our per transaction fee, the percentage that they collect, everything.
Right. Actually, as you know, many credit card companies propose fees differently.
Right.
In this proposal, what RevTrack is doing is they're just going on a flat $3 or 3.49%. So there's no per transaction fee or anything like that.
It's all built in.
Built in, exactly. And that's one thing you have to watch for, because based on, purchasing habits, some of these transactions could be smaller. I mean, maybe at the beginning of the year, beginning of the semester, we could have some larger transactions, but we could have quite a few smaller transactions. And so by having a per dollar, like 95 cents per transaction, some flat fee in there would actually incur a lot more fees for the district. So with this just straight 3.49%, doesn't matter if they're large ticket items or smaller ticket items, we're still going to be having the same amount of fee.
I guess I've had the opportunity to negotiate the rates for credit cards, and these just seem high. And that's a concern, because you only get to negotiate it when you put it in. Once you have it, you're kind of stuck.
Right. I think what we have to recognize is there's apples and oranges here, though, I think, what you're looking at. And I want to make sure we're clear on this. We are having one proposed upfront fee, and that's actually for the computer interface between Infinite Campus and RevTrack. RevTrack, the credit card processing company themselves, is not actually charging any fees. They're going to collect their fees over the life of the transactions. Well, what do they provide for us? Could we get a lower fee from another credit card processor? Absolutely. We have to look at the value they're providing. They're providing the web storefront. They will host that. They'll help us maintain it, and all those things on an ongoing basis. That's built in to that fee. Because you're absolutely right. We could go out and negotiate for a cheaper, just strictly credit card processing, but not providing those additional services, those web store and that customer support and training.
So this is figuring about 22,000 transactions per year.
Yes, that is
Roughly.
just a rough guesstimate.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to say where we'll be, how many parents will take advantage of this process. It's unknown.
And is it Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express?
No American Express,
Okay.
Visa, MasterCard, and Discover.
Okay.
Actually, that's what I was going to ask you on, because I didn't see where you talked about how many transactions you were basing it on. I figured the 3.49% was of the 1.3 million, and that would be what we're charged or what we would pay. Did I misread that, or?
No. Well, the way it'll work is the district will receive the gross proceeds, and then you're billed by the credit card processor. I mean, there's two ways credit cards can be processed, net or gross, and this will be a gross transaction. So if the parent checks out and is buying $50 worth of lunch for their students, then that $50 flows through and will be then credited onto the student's account. The district then is billed for that 3.49%. Now, if approved, along with that $50 would be the transactional fee of $1.95. It's all dependent on what our average ticket size is, but based on just some guessing of, from talking with RevTrak and whatever, they felt like this would be kind of a medium to in the spot where we think based on the number of transactions and the average ticket size, $1.95 would be a close to break even, but at the same time provide our parents with that,
Okay, because I did not
reasonable.
get that out of the first time through. You think we're going to break even on this? Or, I mean, in the ballpark.
Well, I think in the ballpark.
So that 45,000 represents not just the 3.49% of the gross take, it also is an approximation on how much we will collect in fees.
Right, right, but that will only be able to be determined after
I get
history
that.
and
I
all
mean,
of that.
Because, there's obviously, we were joking about this. I don't know if anybody here ever used money bucks or whatever it was for food
My
bucks.
school bucks.
I mean, I know I wrote a lot of checks that they took in and gave to the cashier because I wasn't going to pay $250. But anyway, there's going to be some behavior like that because the way you describe it to me, if I got 3 kids in high school, I'm going to be putting stuff in my cart. I'm going to check out for $3,000, pay my $195, and then the rest of the time you're going to be getting checks from me. But
Right, and there's no way for us to really know that other than what limited exposure we have with our actual lunch
No, but
program.
you answered the real questions I had were, what the 45,000 meant. Now I understand it. You answered the multiple accounts. For the administration, do you anticipate this will replace high school registration? Because I know in the junior highs they're not going in anymore. How are you going to deliver stuff like the discipline codes, get their signatures and all that? Have you thought about that already?
There's no plan at this time to replace that. We are working with the APs to just talk about implementing this appropriately, and then we would assess how it works, what kind of volume is being taken up, and how successful it is, and the feedback we get from both the schools and the users. But we're not at the point where we're looking at eliminating all those other steps that take place at registration.
Because I thought I read this in the newspaper, kids are long gone. The junior highs have gotten rid of that. They don't go in anymore. That's correct?
That's right. Junior high goes through mail-in registration.
Okay.
But I believe each site there are other things associated with like a typical registration. Registering a junior high school student this year, we still visited the site and still went to the site.
Okay. And I think the last thing I had was digging a little deeper, because it sounds like you guys are well along the way here. Debit cards are much cheaper for the vendor than credit cards. Is that reflected in here somewhere, or are they just going to take the same percentage for everything?
No, but that's something we can certainly address with them. But no, right at this time, whether it's a debit card or a credit card, the processing fee would be the same.
Okay. Thank you.
So if you go to your examples that are on where you have the pictures, it has, for example, Brian grade 6 registration, Brian grade 7 registration, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also of the school of thought that this isn't Ticketmaster fees, but it's still a fee. And to the extent that we can make it possible to have as many possible transactions for as many children as we can at the same time, so that you have that. Because unless you mean that if you clicked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes, it's $2, $2, $2, $2, which I don't think you're saying.
No.
So as you know, if I could go into one thing and say, okay, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, all the fees for all the kids, instead of having to go through and say one child per transaction, per fee, et cetera. That, because I also write checks, and I think for some parents it really adds up. The more that you keep going on, and so obviously we need to preserve their check writing ability. But when they do go online, the more that we can make our transactions really large with all our kids on there, the better.
This is really a value added to improve the experience of our families. So that is one of our goals, is to make that happen.
So you gave the example of the lunch through My School Books, but you have other areas that you listed that families are currently using online payments for. I think at least one of those there's absolutely no fee involved. So can you speak to those other pieces as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, My School Bucks is the only place the district currently, to my knowledge, collects a convenience fee. We pay approximately around $10,000 a year annually right now in credit card processing fees for like the card swipes at the high schools and other activities throughout the district.
In other cases, those fees are simply eaten by whichever entity it is that's selling the good. In that case, I'm not entirely sure of all of them, though. I'd have to go back and check.
And I had another one, but I went. And then my other question is that on the memo that you had given us with the more detail, I think Mike asked if it was a break even, but we will have costs incurred through Infinite Campus that are not part of that fee collection, correct?
That's correct. The upfront.
And those will be every year, right?
That would be, $900 a year as a maintenance fee for that.
Okay, and then the upfront of the $5,400. Okay, just want to make sure I understood.
Any other questions? And just a brief comment. Thank you for everyone's indulgence. We actually took things off this agenda when we met in board prep because it was so long. So thank you, everyone. A number of these things, as our administrators looked at them, were time sensitive that we either were introduced to us tonight because they need future action pretty quickly. So thanks for your indulgence. The next couple items will be pretty quick. And ISB resolutions,
I'll quickly make a statement that for the Board of Education that, as you know, you have a copy of the report to the membership from the Illinois Association of School Boards for the 2013 Delegate Assembly meeting scheduled for November 23rd, 2013. Members of the Cabinet also have received a copy of that, are currently in the process of reviewing it, and we'll come to you at the next meeting if we have any recommendations for discussion that are opposite to the recommendation made by the committee. And at this point, then I turn it over to Mr. Fielden, who was a part of that committee, to speak any further on the recommendations.
Well, I don't have any specific comments on any resolutions, except for number 8.
That might be a special one, right?
That's a special one. We should all pay close attention to
an
it.
authored one, right?
Yes. And District 203 participated in the presentation of that resolution. Kristen helped Glenn Allen draft that. But just for the education of the 2 new board members, the resolutions are what the membership votes on to direct the IASB to lobby Springfield to make changes in the laws. And they have had some success in the last couple of years as far as some of these resolutions going forward and making some legislative impact in that. And they're derived from a committee that I get to attend once a year. We go through and vet all the resolutions and go through, and that's where the adopt and not adopt option comes from on each one. So if there's any questions specifically on that, on what some of the committee rationale was, you can ask me about that. But I think this year, as in other years past, these are pretty straightforward, and that it shouldn't be too much of an issue. The only one that I would say was really contentious in my mind was discipline of the board members was one that was talked about. But the one that I really found unusual was district had proposed that if a person pleads guilty to a traffic violation or is pulled over for a traffic violation and they get found guilty, they should be levied a special tax that would go to the school districts in there. And I was keenly interested in that because I pointed out that Naperville is number 2 in the state in DUIs, and it would really be a windfall for us. But I had to vote no. So.
Oh, goodness. Thank you, and we will we'll think about whose schedule permits to be our delegate at our next meeting as well. And again, if you have any questions about that, Terry would be the person to ask. I think it's a Saturday morning meeting generally at the III conference, so you'd have to be able to be there for that as well.
Do you anticipate voting on the resolution at the next meeting or in November?
Yes, next meeting. I think we're going to try to do it at the next meeting.
So we're going to have discussions and vote next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Okey doke. We only have one item in discussion with action. Oh, is this on? One item in discussion with action, and we've talked about it at least a time or two. It'll be the second reading of policy number 6185, online and blended education program. And I think Kane kicked it off. It's I'll let you describe it.
I don't believe we have any new information to present. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those.
Michael?
I move approval of 6.185 online and blended education program policy as presented.
Second. Great. Okie doke. I've got the hint here. We're going to get moving. Okay. The motion on the floor is.
You got to ask for discussion.
The motion on the floor right now is online and blended education program. There's a motion and a second, and I will entertain any questions or comments. Okie doke. And Ann, if you can.
Yes. Yes.
Aye.
Crotty? Yes. Price?
Yes.
Romper?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And schedule of events are out here. Again, thank you to everyone for your diligence in sending us invitations early and getting all these things on our calendar. And last thing, we'll see who's going to jump in to do a motion to adjourn. Please?
Nobody.
Everyone fall asleep. Motion?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you again for everyone for your indulgence tonight. Thanks.